Welcome, everybody. If you're just getting logged on, thank you for joining us. We will get started in just a few minutes. As you get your video and audio set up, please do change your Zoom name so that it says your first name, last name, and organization if you are affiliated. We're going to give folks a few minutes to get signed on, and once we have a quorum, we will get started. It's great to see some familiar faces from previous meetings. If you're just hearing my voice for the first time, thank you for joining us. We'll get started in just a few minutes. If you can add your organization to your Zoom name so we know who you are, that would be great. Welcome. If you're just joining us, we will get started in a few minutes. In the meantime, if you could add your organization to your Zoom name so we know who everybody is, that would be helpful. And if you are unaffiliated, that's okay. And if you'd like to come on camera, you are welcome to. Looks like folks are still signing on, so we'll give another few minutes here. And once more, if you've just signed on, if you could add your organization to your Zoom name so that we know who everybody is, we would appreciate it. Okay, it looks like sign-ons are slowing down, so maybe we'll just give until 5 after the hour, and then we will get started. Okay, it seems like we have a good group here, and I'm not seeing anybody in the waiting room. So let's get started. One last reminder, if you didn't hear these instructions, If you can please change your Zoom name so that it has your first and last name as well as organization. That'll just help us keep track of who's here and know who's talking. Welcome to today's pre-rulemaking workshop focused on implementing the Inclusive Community Solar Program pursuant to Senate Bill 24207. We appreciate you being here. Before I get started, I want to introduce our Spanish language interpreters for the day, Roberto Blanco and Lynette Garcia. And they're going to give you some instructions around how the interpretation function works, and then we'll get started officially.
Muchas gracias, Corey. Thank you so much, Corey. Hi, everyone. Un gusto. Hola a todos. Hi, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you all today. Thank you to the organizers of the space for committing to practicing language access where everyone can connect in their heart language, understand, ask questions in that heart language. It is beyond just a checkbox. It is a commitment. So thank you, thank you. Muchas gracias a los organizadores de este espacio por comprometerse a la justicia del lenguaje, porque va más allá de no más la interpretación, ¿verdad? Entonces, muchas gracias por hacer ese espacio disponible. As soon as interpretation is turned on, you'll see a globe at the bottom of your screen. If you are on a tablet or on a cell phone, it might look a little bit different because there's going to be 3 little dots to the right where you can select your heart language there. Please do not suffer in silence. Let us know if you have any questions, any trouble with interpretation. Feel free to share in the chat. Por favor, no sufran en silencio. Déjenos saber en el chat si tienen algún problema con la interpretación. Si están en una computadora, va a haber un globo terráqueo abajo en su pantalla. Si están en un celular, en una tableta, van a 3 puntitos a la derecha donde pueden seleccionar el idioma de su corazón. Kind reminder to our folks that are speaking today, Spanish is 15 to 20% times longer than English. And even if we speak super fast and because we're interpreters, it still takes us a little bit of time. So please be aware of your pace. We would greatly appreciate it. Por favor, a los oradores, a los que están compartiendo el día de hoy, el español es a 15 a 20% veces más largo que el inglés. Entonces nos toma un poquito más tiempo. Aunque hablemos súper rápido aún, nos toma tiempo. Entonces estén al tanto de eso. Please be aware of acronyms as well. Part of practicing language access is not just interpretation, but making sure that everyone in the space can understand what is being said. So a practice that we want to share with you all, if there's acronyms, share them a couple of times. Define them in the chat for us, please, so that everyone can understand and that we can interpret those acronyms as well. Por favor, parte de la justicia del lenguaje y el acceso es que va más allá de la interpretación, que también haya entendimiento en el espacio de lo que se está compartiendo. Entonces, si hay un acrónimo, por favor, compártalo unas cuantas veces, compártalo en el chat, defínanlo, por favor, para ayudarnos a tener un espacio más inclusivo. I think that is all, Corey. Let's go ahead and turn interpretation on and see if it's working. Vamos a aprender la interpretación, Corey, y vamos a asegurarnos de que esté funcionando, ¿sí? Gracias. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Lynette, and thank you to our interpreters for today. We really appreciate you being here. My name is Corey Felder. I'm an advisor here at the Commission. I am joined by Aaron Hardick, my colleague here at the Commission, and Eric Haglund, another colleague here at the Commission. And this is our pre-rulemaking workshop focused on inclusive community solar. You could go ahead to the next slide. So we have two things we hope to accomplish via today's session. As we've communicated over the last few weeks, our primary aim here, as opposed to some of the previous meetings in this pre-rulemaking process, is to explore implementing some specific provisions from the statute into Commission rules. And we've shared in advance some of the topics and the questions that we have associated with those topics. Second, this is another opportunity to share other ideas or feedback that maybe we haven't teed up as part of the topics for this session. We have 4 hours together. We may need all of that time. We may not need all of that time, and we can adjust as needed. We are going to walk through the topics in a pretty straightforward way. We'll do a check-in to get the gears kind of moving around what it is that we're talking about here today, and we'll have some specific prompts for you there. The check-in, just so you're aware, is the only time we'll be using the breakout function today. After that, we'll pretty much be staying together as a plenary group here. Once we're done with the check-in, we'll use the rest of our time to kind of walk through the topics that we've outlined together. We'll take a brief have a brief interlude where we want to share back with you some of the feedback that we've heard as part of this pre-rulemaking process and see if you have any additions to that list or other reactions that would be helpful for the commission to consider. And then we'll start by talking about approaches to setting capacity levels in 2027 and beyond. We'll take a break. We have two breaks planned for today, both 10 minutes. And then we'll talk a little bit about renewable energy credits and their treatment in the context of the Inclusive Community Solar Program and the Commission's rules. We'll talk a little bit about utility reporting and information sharing. We'll take another break, and then we'll wrap up with talking about some of the expectations for subscriber organizations. We'll do a checkout and talk about any next steps that emerge from the conversation, and then we'll conclude. As I said, we have two breaks planned, so just be aware there will be, I know this is a long session, so there will be two 10-minute breaks for you to go get coffee or water or whatever you need. So before we get into our check-in with this agenda and these goals in mind, I did want to just share a few reminders. First, this is an informal workshop before we launch the formal rulemaking process. So in other words, we're still at the beginning of this process. And there are going to be other opportunities for this group or others to provide input on the rules. You may be aware, as we've shared in previous meetings, that there is currently an active feedback tool that you can provide written informal comments outside of the context of this workshop. There will also be the formal process with written comments and a hearing as part of that process. Our focus, I would say, in addition to the goals that I outlined as part of this meeting, is really to be generating ideas that can inform the initial set of proposed rules for the formal rulemaking. So I encourage everybody to speak up if you have input that you'd like to share. If you're still learning about community solar and this is one of your first times or even your first time kind of engaging with community solar, electricity regulation, no question is too small. And just by the looks of who's in the room, there's a lot of expertise here around both of those topics that can help answer questions in addition to the commission staff. If you've been working in this space for a long time, help us think outside of the box where appropriate, or test ideas where appropriate. You have a room full of folks where you can get some good real-time reactions, and it's helpful for us to see that dialogue go on as well. Before we dive into or transition into our check-in here, are there any questions? Okay. So in just a minute, we are going to send you to paired groupings in breakout rooms to talk about these two check-in questions. What does a successful inclusive community solar program in 2030 look like to you? And what does an unsuccessful inclusive community solar program in 2030 look like to you? The groups will be assigned at random. What I'd like you to do is before we send you to the breakout rooms, take 2 minutes to journal privately. You can pull out a piece of paper or pull up a Word document or whatever works for you about what your responses are to these questions. And then Aaron will open breakout rooms and you'll have 5 minutes to share your responses to these questions with your partner. Once those 5 minutes are up, we'll come back together and we'll kind of talk about anything that came up during those pairs that would be helpful and to see what you came up with. And don't read too much into the 2030 date here. We just wanted to pick a date in the future. So don't get hung up on that. But again, why don't we start the clock now on 2 minutes of journaling individually or just thinking if you'd rather. And then, Aaron, I will give you the signal to open the breakout room after those 2 minutes are up. Any questions before we start this check-in? Okay, let's start the clock. 2 minutes. What does a successful ICS program look like to you in 2030? What does an unsuccessful ICS program look like to you in 2030? Got about 20 seconds or so left in the 2 minutes. So if you're still writing, keep writing, but maybe start thinking about wrapping it up. All right. If everyone can kind of finish up their thought, we're going to go ahead and open the breakout rooms. Again, this is an opportunity for you to share with your partner. You'll have one partner in your group, 5 minutes on the clock, and then we'll bring back together and ask a little bit about what you discussed.
And we do have, I'll open them now, but we do have one group with 3 people.
Ryan, do you need any help getting to your breakout?
He might not be there.
Yeah, maybe you could move
I'll
Philip
move.
into another room.
Aaron, you can pair me with someone also if someone's without a partner.
I moved. I moved the person who is paired with Ryan to another room. But thanks, Eric.
Josh Anderson, I think I see you just joined us.
Yeah, hey everybody. Sorry for joining late.
No problem at all. Just want to let you know we're doing a brief breakout session just as a check-in. And so we've asked folks to think about what would a successful inclusive community solar program look like in 2030, and what would an unsuccessful community solar program look like in 2030. I think given there's only about a minute left of the breakouts, we'll just keep you here. But if you want to take a minute to kind of think about what your response would be when folks come back, they're going to share out.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
And if you wouldn't mind, Josh, just adding your organization to your Zoom name as well, that would be helpful.
Okay, closing the breakout rooms.
Welcome back. If you're just coming back, we've got about 10 more seconds before the breakouts rooms close. So we'll wait for everybody to get back and then we'll keep going. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for hopefully having a good conversation in your paired groups. Usually 5 minutes either goes by very quickly or very slowly. Um, we have a few minutes now, and I'd love to hear what folks had to say in their breakout rooms. I will let folks, you can just come off mute and share, or you can share via chat, but we'd love to see, get a sense for what some of the answers were on this. Maybe why don't we start with what does a successful ICS program look like? Any notable responses that folks want to share? Mike.
Well, Corey, I'll try to break the uncomfortable silence for you here, I guess, and jump in first. But I think, a successful program, at least it kind of seems to me, in 2030 would be one where the additional capacity can meet the continued demand, or at least the continued assumed demand for community solar. I mean, community solar brings a lot of good things to bear, including being able folks that can't otherwise install rooftop solar or take advantage of solar, be able to use community solar and other good aspects. And we've seen the demand has been high to take advantage of community solar and would anticipate that to continue. So wouldn't really want people to be turned away from it if they want it, say circa 2030, because the capacity just isn't there. So I'll just add that up there to begin with.
Thanks, Mike. Let's go to Claire and then Ryan.
Thanks. Yeah, I can share my thoughts on what a successful or unsuccessful program looks like. I think from where I sit, I think a really successful program would be one that provides very tangible and like meaningful benefits to the income qualified participants. So I think historically we haven't had a lot of insight into what participants in community solar might experience as like the bill impact on their bill at that kind of individual level. And so I think having the opportunity for a income qualified customer, to ensure that those benefits are meaningful bill impacts that like reduce their energy burden is something that's really important. And I spoke with Ross Smith, now of Excel Energy, about this, and I think he had some really good points too about a successful program being collaborative and understandable as well.
Thanks, Corey. Yeah, just a couple other thoughts just from, Excel Energy perspective, because we do have a lot of these, a lot of community solar gardens here operating. And just to kind of add some context, I guess, to think through, I think a successful program kind of balances support for customers enrolled in the gardens, especially, to Claire's point around income qualified customers, but then balances that with like what is the value to the grid, and and really what I mean by that is like how do these gardens support the electric grid and provide value to all customers, including those who don't participate in the programs. And I think a lot of that is like, what is the value of what they provide, and then also what are the costs to kind of like operate and the bill credits and things like that. So I think that's where my head is at, kind of balancing the value to participating customers and also all customers.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Claire. I see some agreement on the grid value there in the chat. Does anybody else want to share? I guess we can do successful or unsuccessful. Bill, I see you added something into chat. Did you want to share out your idea?
Yeah, I think the benefits should create equity. And in the past, equity has been handouts for poor people taken from rich people. In this case, why not have the low-income folks become the actual equity owners of the revenue generating asset? The promise of solar is once the equipment pays back, the sun's free. And no one's ever got low-income people to free energy. And we can do that with a program like this if we focus on getting equity for the subscribers and pay down and pay off the system so they can get to free energy.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for sharing that out. Philip, Tom, do you want to add anything to what you put in chat here? All right. Well, why don't I'll do one last pass here. Is anybody who hasn't had a chance to speak like to speak? Focus on either successful or unsuccessful. Do folks agree with some of the other things that they've heard? Thank you, Danielle. I see you've added a comment to chat here. Program that allows flexibility to meet low income requirements would be ideal. Allowing a project owner to choose between several options. Maybe I should have you share this out actually instead of
Yeah,
mischaracterizing.
certainly. Sorry, I wasn't able to join the breakout room, so my other call ran over. But I think looking at like programs like Massachusetts, right? They sort of a stipulation under the Smart 3.0 where you can do like 15% of your project, but give those low income customers 100% discount. I love that. It really feels more impactful for those low income customers. Or if you feel like that's not doable for your program, like great, you can do 40% of your project to low income customers, but you have to give them a minimum of 20% discount. So I think just like being flexible on like the minimum discount. And then things like UCB, right? For at least the low income customers, if not all customers, would be great. And then self-attestation as a verification tool. Power Market, I come from Power Market. We're a community solar subscription manager. So just working with these low income customers in other states, we want to make it as easy as possible to get these types of customers the benefits that they deserve. So I think providing that flexibility really makes a big difference in terms of getting their enrollment and helping them see those benefits on their electric bills.
Thank you, Danielle. Could I just ask you, what does UCB stand for the group?
Yes, sorry. Uniform Consolidated Billing. Some people call it net crediting. Just allowing the credits to be netted on the customer's bill by the utility, as opposed to credits being applied on their bill and then them needing to pay an additional bill to a project owner.
Thank you. All right, Joel, I see you've added a comment in here about 100% of LIHEAP low income. Oh boy, LIHEAP households having access to low cost CSG subscriptions in 2030. Anything you want to add about that?
No, Corey, nothing in particular. Just seems like a worthwhile goal. And LIHEAP acronym, Low Income Heating and Energy Assistance Program, I believe.
Thank you. Excellent. Well, this is a really interesting range of ideas here, and I appreciate folks taking the time to think this through. We're going to move on now, but if you do have other thoughts on this check-in question that you want to, from your discussion or from your journaling that you want to share in the chat, feel free, and we will be saving this chat to review after the meeting. We're going to move on now to providing a bit of a synthesis of what we've heard over the last few months as part of this pre-rulemaking process. So the idea here is really that we want to share back some of what we've heard. These are suggestions made by you all or by stakeholders or participants of those previous meetings. Their presence on this slide does not mean that the commission is definitely going to do these things, but we want to make sure that folks are understanding and we understand what we've really heard as part of this process and some of the specific ideas that have come up. So I'm going to kind of walk through this slide and the next slide with the feedback summary and share out some of these ideas. And then I will pause if folks want to add anything, comment on any of the suggestions that have been made, and or talk about anything that's maybe missing from this list. So in our initial learning session back in May, we were more focused on, I think, sharing information about the program and the statute, but we did hear a few specific suggestions that I've repeated here. Consider ways for local governments to help with outreach for their residents, so on the customer-facing side of the program. Consider how to ensure there is clear, centralized information about the program for potential subscribers, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Consider if Black Hills should adopt consolidated billing. It is already a requirement for Excel. In our first community input meeting, which as a reminder was on May 26th, and it was focused on Excel Energy service territory. We heard about the idea of a clearinghouse for inclusive community solar information. That's sort of all-inclusive, all information about the program all in one place. We had a brief discussion about whether that's really the commission's role or another agency like the Colorado Energy Office. We heard a suggestion to consider some additional standardization, specifically when it comes to the subscriber agreement between the subscriber organization and a subscriber. And some folks shared, some examples of what those agreements look like. We were encouraged to consider measures to address community member concerns about scams, deceptive practices, and/or hidden fees that may occur as part of this program, with the specific idea of maybe a vetted list of subscriber organizations for customers to refer to. We heard about including some additional programs on the list of ways to verify income, to qualify as an income qualified subscriber and receive the associated discounts. Specifically, Colorado's Affordable Residential Energy Program, and other bill assistance programs, in addition to those that are already listed in the statute. And then we heard a suggestion around preferred locations, which if you remember, preferred locations are projects that can be slightly larger. There's a list in the statute of what those preferred locations are that allow this a bit of prioritized treatment and the expanded capacity per project. The suggestion was to consider including grid-constrained areas on that list of preferred locations. In our second community input meeting, which was focused on Black Hills Energy service territory, we heard some additional conversation around other ways that utilities and subscriber organizations can keep potential subscribers informed of new capacity allocations so that they know more about how they can subscribe or what headroom there is to subscribe. We heard another suggestion of a program, the Home Electrification and Appliance Rebates Program, that could be on the list of programs to help determine income qualified subscriber eligibility. We heard a few suggestions for specificity around the list of preferred locations, landfills, and the Bessemer Ditch in Pueblo. We heard some support for a framework approach for setting future capacity levels rather than setting of specific numerical capacity levels in the rules. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. We heard some suggestions around how a subscriber's consumption is calculated for purposes of setting their subscription under the program, with a request that we consider allowing planned home upgrades like a future heat pump purchase, incorporating that into the estimate of electricity consumption that the subscription is based on. And then we heard a suggestion or a question around the use of renewable energy credits by the utilities for renewable energy standard compliance. You can go to the next slide, Aaron. So here's a continuation. So those were our 3 meetings we've had thus far. We also did receive some comments and suggestions over the website engagement tool, and I'll cover them here. So ensure additional information about the current program status, such as available program or ICS capacity, is included on the utilities websites to support improved implementation. Consider how to make sure that there's actually enough subscriber organizations for enrollment of income qualified customers in Black Hills service territory. That commenter reported to kind of a historical lack of subscriber organizations operating in that service territory as a barrier. Manage program success by whether income qualified households receive real lasting bill savings that improve household stability and affordability. Build the program around community-based outreach, not just communications from the utility or developer. So really bringing in some of those organizations into the mix. Making it really easy and automatic if somebody moves within the utility service territory so that their subscription can come with them. Clarify how projects will sustain the requirement that at least 51% of capacity serves income qualified customers over time. Ensure the incentive program administrator navigator. I took this to mean the potentially the subscriber organizations or subscription coordinator has bilingual staff capacity. Evaluating not just how much has been deployed, but also things like accessibility, retention, savings, and reach into historic communities that have historically been left out of clean energy benefits as part of the consideration around future capacity and program requirements. Ensure that there's an inclusive workforce for the program and require plain language, multi-language materials with Spanish as standard. I know that's a lot of information to share out, but I do think it's important that we all kind of hear what the diversity of suggestions that are being made are. And like I said, I'm going to pause now, and I'd love to hear from anybody, any of those resonate in particular, spark new ideas. Is there anything missing from this list that you remember coming up during a meeting that maybe we didn't capture that you want us to consider? Aaron, maybe you could go back to the previous slide just so folks have that in front of them as well. Danielle.
Yeah, I just want to echo that I see some really great like organizations listed here. So people have provided great input on like the CARE program and kind of the HERE program. I think that the program should look to be as inclusive as possible, including these programs, federal programs, maybe even local level programs that serve income qualified. Even going as far again as to just like reiterate like self-attestation. Nothing is more, as a subscriber organization who does acquisition as well, nothing is more upsetting than having to leave like a someone behind who is clearly income qualified and they just don't happen to have the documentation or they don't have the one thing that the program prescribes. So I think trying to be, just when we're looking at this, to be as inclusive as possible to make sure that we're getting and achieving the goal of serving the income qualified is just something to keep in mind here.
Thank you, Danielle. Beckett?
Hi, thank you, Corey. I'm with Ampian. We are also a subscription coordinator, like Power Market. I echo everything that she said on the low income verification front. I also just want to highlight, from our perspective, having access to historical usage information is super important for us as we try to ensure that we are, allocating subscribers in the most optimal way to maximize the benefits that they're receiving from the program. And I can get into that in a little more detail maybe during the utility reporting and information sharing section, but I just wanted to flag that as something we're thinking a lot about.
Thank you, Beckett. If I could just ask you a quick follow-up, and we could talk about it later as you suggested, but when you say historical usage, you mean of a potential subscriber, right?
Correct. Both of a potential subscriber and also importantly, updated information over time as that subscriber participates in the program. It's one thing to know their usage at the time of the enrollment, but as we know, usage changes over time. Maybe they get a electric heat pump or something and their usage changes over time, and it's super valuable for us to know about those changes so that we can adjust their allocation.
Great. Thank you for clarifying. Any other thoughts before we move on into our first topic, big topic of the day, capacity levels? Someone said it before, but this is a really good set of suggestions for us to consider. So appreciate everybody who's contributed to this list here, and hopefully we'll surface some other ideas and suggestions in the course of this meeting. Okay, so in just a moment, we're gonna shift to our first topic for the day. We've got about 45 minutes scheduled for the discussion if we need it, all that time. For each topic, you'll see we've kind of we provided some background and context on the left side of the slide, and then we provided those discussion prompts that we shared out yesterday on the right side. If you have additional discussion prompts you think would be helpful on a given topic for us to talk about, please don't be shy. Just want to give you a sense for the setup for each of the topics. So with that, let's go ahead and move into our first topic for the day, approaches to setting capacity levels after 2027. So this section 3C of the statute directs the commission to, on or before February 1st and February 1st, 2028, and periodically thereafter, to determine the amount of ICS capacity utilities are required to make available by rule or by order. In the pre-rulemaking process, this topic has come up a fair amount. And we've heard from you all, or from those who are participating in those meetings, that there's a number of factors the commission should take into account when thinking about those future capacity levels and how we fulfill that statutory directive. I repeat them here because I think it's helpful to hear about what some of those trade-offs that have already come up are. On the one hand, more certainty supports developer participation. Flexibility is needed to adapt to changing circumstances. That would be sort of a trade-off in terms of whether we actually set the amounts in rule versus not. Maybe changing circumstances mean that setting something in stone now isn't going to be quite as useful a few years from now. Similarly, program costs and benefits may change over time. Maybe that includes some of the grid value comment we heard earlier. Maybe it's strictly about the program costs and benefits, as has been discussed in some of the recent cases where this program has been discussed. This program is in its early stages in terms of implementation, so performance of the program, how much remaining capacity there's going to be in 2028 and beyond in a given year isn't quite known yet. So some trade-offs in how we think about capacity levels and where we want to we being the commission, may want to address future capacity levels. This kind of leads us to three big questions around capacity levels and a few options. The first one here on the right, how, if at all, should we address the future capacity levels in the rules? One option, as we've discussed in previous meetings, would be to establish the actual numerical capacity amounts, in megawatts in the rules itself. So that might look like the utility shall make 25 megawatts of inclusive community solar capacity available, annually starting in February 1st, 2028. That's just a sample. The second we've talked about and we are considering whether establishing some criteria for the utilities to consider when they are proposing future capacity levels in another proceeding, or proposing future capacity levels in a future proceeding. And those criteria might be things we heard suggestions like what's the unused capacity from the prior year? What's the actual versus the projected program cost? What are the total income qualified subscriber savings that have accrued either over the prior approved years of the program or in the prior year? Those are just examples. There could be other types of criteria, and I'd be curious to hear if anyone has any additional suggestions. The third option that we have been considering and discussing is maybe we don't address future capacity levels in the rules. The statute offers the commission some discretion to do it via a future order, not just by rule. And we've heard some folks support that view. If moving down to the second bullet here, if the commission chooses option B or C in the previous bullet, there is then a secondary question, which is like, what is the proceeding or venue in which future capacity levels should be approved? And one point about option B that I meant to say is that if we were to establish criteria for utilities to consider and then propose future capacity levels, it would be to propose them for commission approval. So not just that the utility gets to unilaterally decide, but that it would be some kind of process in which commission would be able to review what that proposal is, perhaps as part of a litigated process. So what potential proceedings are there or venues are there to consider those future capacity levels if we were to go with option B or C? Could be a standalone filing of some sort. Thus far, inclusive community solar has been dealt with via the Renewable Energy Standard Plan, the RES plan. So that's another option. We wanted to also throw out maybe there's some value in doing it in the electric resource plan process as well, or maybe there's another process we haven't thought of where a capacity level proposal might be appropriate. Moving down to the third bullet here, and then I'll pause and let folks, and we'll start the discussion. But if we were to go with options B or C, which means a utility proposal at a future date of capacity levels, what information do folks think would need to be included in that proposal in order for it to be to provide kind of the foundation for a discussion about or a litigated process about what those capacity levels should look like. So a bunch of questions embedded in here. We wanted to lay out some structural or some structure to the conversation. I'm gonna open it up now to the group and we'll see where the discussion takes us. James, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, thanks, Corey. And thanks for laying it all out like this. And the prior discussion that I think offered some really helpful and useful context to all have in our minds as we think about this question. I've been thinking about these questions that you circulated, and it strikes me that they are not mutually exclusive, and there's ways to consider some of the best aspects of all of them as a way forward. I really agree with the sub-bullets here on the left side of the context about the certainty being needed to support participation. And we just had a discussion about the ongoing benefits that this program can have for supporting our supporting making supporting affordability goals for bringing more communities into the bill savings benefits of renewable energy and creative ways of pairing this with other programs to spread the affordability benefits here. So I think that some amount of certainty is really important to keep this market going and keep the benefits of subscription flowing out to customers. So I wonder if we could think about some baseline level of numerical capacity that everybody can count on going forward. So there's some level of certainty the program will persist beyond beyond 2027. I'm thinking specifically about unused capacity from prior years. At least making certain that any amount of capacity available now that doesn't get used during, this 2-year ICS period would be made available. That would be a big help. And then thinking about some baseline level of capacity that will continue to be offered. So that's something that developers and communities could plan around. So, I don't have a specific number in mind right now, but some baseline level. And then beyond that baseline amount, is there a venue for utilities and stakeholders to think about additional capacity if it's cost effective for bringing in different for adding on to that. So I think that some of these, the res plan, the ERP, some other filing, could be a good venue for adding on or refining the the capacity being offered. So I want to take more time after this workshop and after participating in the discussion to maybe provide some more written feedback on this and after discussing more with some of our membership on this question. But yeah, I guess I'd just encourage consideration of the certainty that you get with establishing some baseline numerical amount, but having that flexibility to adjust, add on, or refine through the parallel proceeding or rulemaking.
Thanks, James. I'd love to hear folks' responses to that suggestion, but maybe one quick follow-up question to you, James. And if you don't want to respond yet and want to think about it, that's okay. But what would happen if we were to do, as you're suggesting, and sort of set a floor, but then add in a process to maybe adjust that at a later date? And also clarify what happens to unused capacity from the prior period. What would happen then if there's a lot of leftover unused capacity, but we're still adding additional capacity? Would do you, and maybe you need to think about this, but would there be a process to adjust those amounts in future years, or
Yeah.
how could you account for that eventuality?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you'd have to account for it in some way. So maybe it's additional capacity that gets triggered if the unused capacity is below, a certain amount. So maybe that just factors into the whole floor thing. So if there's a bunch of unused capacity, then maybe we can just work from that. But if it's all getting used up and there's program interest and robust participation, then there's some certainty that, there's going to be some continued activity there. So yeah, just my initial reaction is something along those lines. Also, I'm going to have to jump for a little bit at one, but Blake Elder from CCSA is here, and we'll continue to participate in this discussion.
Thank you.
And I'll come back later too, if you're still going.
Okay, great. Claire.
Thanks. Yeah, so many questions in here. Where to start? I think to maybe start, WRA leans a little more toward the option B or option C of either establishing criteria or just not addressing future capacity levels in the rules. I think as far as the concept of hard coding capacity goes, I think one of the concerns with that would just be not knowing right now before having, seen the results of the program over the years, whether as the program evolves, if this is really the best structure to either, deliver equity benefits to different groups of customers, to deliver grid value, or if there might be other program models that, as time goes on, that might be better suited to supporting income qualified customers or customers in disproportionately impacted communities, or to deliver grid benefits, pairing CSGs with storage, that kind of thing. And so I think we're hesitant to have in rule a hard-coded amount of capacity that could lock in a certain amount of a program if we start to see over time that there might be ways that the program could evolve beyond the like statutory description of ICS to like provide more benefits at a lower cost. So I think that's kind of the high level perspective that we have on it. I do think as far as like if the commission were to move forward with option B as far as establishing criteria for utilities to consider. I think you already named a number of the things, Corey. I think the equity benefits, that being the like actual benefits that have been delivered to income qualified customers through the program, or potential benefits if there were, maybe changes to program design. I know Ryan mentioned earlier grid benefits. That's a huge one that WRA is interested in as well. Whether and to what extent ICS is providing grid benefits or modifications that could enable grid benefits. Obviously, cost is a huge one as well, looking at both the like system value of a resource and equity benefits. And then to kind of point to that potential for a program to evolve over time. I think if there were criteria for looking at what the capacity levels could be in a future proceeding, I think that should also consider alternative program options and like what are the costs and benefits of those, whether that's like program models that could advance decarbonization while providing bill assistance to income qualified customers, or program models that could better maximize the cost effectiveness and benefits of distributed resources. So just noting some of those, I think we'll kind of see how things play out over time, and just wondering if there might be some limitations that crop up as far as the definition of ICS and its functions that we might, not want to hard code a perpetual future into it if there's ways that can change over time.
Thank you, Claire. Let's do Philip and then Ryan.
Good, thank you. And I mean, honestly, I could have probably, unraised my hand and said I just agree very much with Claire. I think there are some very, very good points there about like if we start from the beginning, what are the objectives that the statute, that the Senate bill that implemented inclusive community solar, what are they trying to accomplish? Seems to be, more clean energy and helping address energy affordability for income qualified customers or people living in disproportionately impacted communities. Is this the best tool? I think would be a wonderful question for the commission to ask itself whenever establishing capacity levels. I think we at Black Hills would definitely also lean towards either option B or C here, having some parameters for the commission to consider when determining capacity levels, so the commission has the flexibility to be able to adjust capacity levels as they learn more about the programs, and as they have to balance other priorities from the legislature, other costs on the customers. So that is where we're leaning as well.
Thank you, Philip. Let's go to Ryan.
Thanks, Corey. And I'll just again just kind of echo what Claire and Philip just said around, is this the most appropriate venue to provide, value to our income qualified customers? And then also thinking about kind of the role of commission rules. And I think understanding them to be kind of more evergreen. So not kind of in response to, this is just addressing this, unallocated capacity in 2027, but thinking out, 5-10 years. And so trying not to hard code in numbers or prescriptive requirements that it needs to meet, for providing kind of the flexibility to address changes in the market, changes in federal incentives, changes in legislation, all of which we've seen in the last 12 months. And so there are things that we will just never be able to know right now as we set rules. And so I think option C basically gives us that flexibility to address that at some sort of regular cadence. And so, yeah, but yeah, agree with everything the previous two said as well.
And Ryan, a quick follow-up, and then I see your hand, Mike. But you know, hearing you talk about option C as B or C, but C as kind of the ideal one from your perspective at this stage, then what about for the question of proceeding or venue? Do you still see the res plan as the right venue? And what would you probably then include in a proposal?
Yeah, so I think the res plan could be a spot. The res plan is very tied to our ERP as well, so I think that could be a great option too. With changes to our res from the sunset bill, I think we'll have to discuss like what is the future of the res too. So maybe again, kind of like providing that flexibility in rules to say, the res plan or ERP or appropriate proceeding, something like that, I think would be helpful. And then similar to what would we include in that proceeding? I think similar to today would be, bringing forward capacity, likely bringing forward proposed capacity in the program. And I guess depending on what is the program requirement based on, whatever the current legislation is, would dictate a lot of kind of the program design or requirements, but bring forward, that as well, similar to what we've done historically.
Thanks, Ryan. I definitely, I guess I would be curious if anybody has thoughts on that venue question of like leaving it totally open to like any proceeding, sort of like you're describing. Maybe that goes a little bit too far, but then does that not provide enough like process certainty if one year it could show up in the ERP and one year it could show up in the res plan? So just throwing that out there if anybody wants to respond to it. But Mike, why don't we go to you next?
Yeah, thanks, Corey. I guess I don't know, if I'll have a specific recommendation at this point in time of the discussion, but wanted to point out a couple of things. One, there's a big difference from the developers and subscriber organizations perspective between a program that could be realistically assumed to be, say, 25 megawatts to 35 or 50. I'm just pulling numbers out of the air, but that there will be a program, as opposed to the possibility, depending on the proceeding, that it could be anywhere between, say, 0 and 50. It's, I think, as we all know, these projects take years to develop, and if you want to have a program, you need to have folks that are able to develop the facilities for the program. I don't disagree necessarily with having some level of flexibility, because the landscape that we see now could be completely different by, say, 2030 in many different ways, including, I don't think people necessarily consider that we don't have an ITC after a certain date due to the current federal administration, but that could change again between 26 and 28 or beyond. So it could go the other way as well. So I don't disagree, as I said, about having some kind of flexibility, but I think the main concern I would want to put out there at this point is there shouldn't be some kind of criteria that could just then lead, say, the utility to recommend 0, and that's then how it goes, depending on how the proceeding it goes. I think that would be a big concern for the industry.
And Mike, at the risk of asking maybe an uninformed question, but can you maybe say a little bit more? So let's say that scenario played out and a utility proposes 0 megawatts of capacity. Can you just talk a little bit more about like the impact to developers? Is it just developers will go elsewhere because there's no program? It again, maybe this is an uninformed question. I'm just trying to tease out some of the implications of that option or that
Yeah, I
scenario.
mean, clearly it's going to depend on the developer. Some have higher risk tolerance than others, but it's going to play out sooner than just having that number. If there's a possibility that the program doesn't exist, then those that are financing the development are going to ask that question, and the realistic answer is going to be, yeah, it could go down to zero at some point. Maybe it'll be 50. We don't really know because it's just wide open. So I think it starts with the financeability of programs or of doing development, but then ultimately, yes, developers, I mean, clearly if it goes down to zero, you're going to have developers that are just not going to play in Colorado, but there's just the uncertainty you have to account for. If there's going to be a program and there's going to be some amount of capacity, that bodes a lot better for that kind of certainty than the possibility, I should say, that there's just going to be zero capacity.
Thank you, Mike. Philip, why don't we go to you next and then Claire?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I can have some empathy with with the developers wanting to have some predictability, some certainty for a pipeline. I would also probably not propose that we make year by year determination. So like this year we'll make X capacity available. Next year it'll be like a decision per year. I would also want like a longer time frame of some sort for reducing workload and giving certainty. Um, I think possibly I mean, usually I would have proposed the RES plan, the Renewable Energy Standard Plan, as the most natural home for this proposal or this decision of the Commission, with the possible changes of the PUC sunset bill and the possibility that like the shift from the renewable energy standard or more towards the clean energy plan that is implied there. It could be part of the clean energy plan, which is also has to go along with the ERP. I think that would be a fairly natural place to put it. That would give what is that, a four year cadence or something like that. I think that would maybe solve some of this issue here.
I have a follow-up for you, but let's go to Claire and we can come back to that.
Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the forum as well, and I'll note I may be speaking more from a perspective of an organization that has been intervening more in public services proceedings than in Black Hills. So maybe with that context, yeah, I agree with the person earlier that noted, there's maybe a question about the future of the renewable energy standard plan, and so yeah, I do wonder whether there's a way to maybe specify that that it would be best handled in a litigated proceeding setting. I do think that would be at least valuable to specify that piece to enable stakeholders to be able to have the opportunity to do discovery and ask questions about that could inform a capacity level setting through the process. But yeah, wonder how how proceedings might evolve if the renewable energy standard plan doesn't really exist in the same format in the future. If this is something that could potentially be addressed in like a broader customer program filing that might that might end up evolving, or like I think it's worth observing also that there's the equity rulemaking going on right now, so there could be a potential for something like an equity impact proceeding that might be a appropriate place to look at programming that would support income qualified customers, like this type of programming. So I think generally it would be beneficial to address this type of question in something that's more of like more focused on customer programming than focused on like electric resource planning, kind of from a personal opinion of just like I think some of the details of this type of program could get lost in something that is, as like big as an ERP that addresses a lot of other types of questions, but that yeah, still a lot of value in like digging into the nitty-gritty of this in a litigated setting in some sort of like customer program type filing. So sorry if that was unhelpful and like, how that might manifest in rule, but something to think on.
No, I think the specificity around litigated proceeding rather than leaving it open-ended is an interesting suggestion, and I think you're starting to get at what I was gonna ask you, Philip, as a follow-up, but anyone can respond. Like, if we were to go down that electric resource plan route, and try and determine capacity levels as part of that plan, recognizing that things could change later on. But what does that look like? Does the ERP accommodate that conversation? And then would you need to, so for example, would you need to like um, I can see where it's helpful. You're looking at other resource costs and stuff like that alongside community solar. But on the other hand, are you just determining the capacity levels and not addressing kind of the other program? Still need to address all the other program requirements or implementation issues elsewhere, or could that also be in the ERP? So some of those, I'm curious, Philip, if you have any thoughts on that. That could also be a follow-on conversation or for comments.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Corey. I think initially I was probably envisioning that, well, the entire thing would live in the ERP or in maybe in the clean energy plan next to it. I feel like that's, yeah, I mean, they those two documents, they go together anyway. They were filed at the same time anyway. So potato, whether which one of them it is in. I think that hopefully there won't be just thinking about like the reporting we've done on community solar gardens before and like the capacity levels that have been set there. I think it's possible to do it all in the ERP, but I think it's an interesting perspective from you, Claire, that what if it's more suited to a customer program setting like that. That's also, I think that's an interesting perspective. And it's also making me think once again, like, yeah, what are we trying to achieve with this program? If it's in a customer program setting, that's telling me that we're trying to like, and the main focus is addressing energy affordability, helping income qualified customers, and then I would want to compare this program to other possible ways of meeting that same goal, so we can get, I mean, the most bang for the buck, help the most people for the least amount of cost to the total system and to other customers. In contrary, if this was to live in the ERP, in the energy resource plan environment, I would want to know how does this, how do community solar help, keep the lights on, and at what cost level? How do they help the grid stay reliable? What is the ELCC, electric load carrying capability of standalone solar? For anyone who doesn't know, once there's more and more of the same type of resource added to the system, of the same non-dispatchable resource, which solar is, the value from a system perspective diminishes. And that means, for example, in Black Hills case, we have 200 megawatts of solar going online in 29. 2 megawatts of inclusive community solar is not going to help us keep the lights on super much in that situation, as when the community solar will produce, so will the 200 megawatts at significantly lower cost. So once again, if I would encourage that the commission, through these rules, and they may eventually make determinations, that they do consider if this is the most effective way to achieve the goals they set out to do, both from a clean energy, reliable system, low cost perspective, and like a social program helping income qualified people.
Thank you, Philip. Ryan, I'll come to you in just a minute, but I did want to note, I see Berlin, you added a comment that's a little bit more from the customer perspective. I think we've heard thus far a developer and utility and WRA perspective. But I'd be interested, Berlin, if there's anything else you can share about your comment on IQ households, income qualified households.
Yeah, Corey, thank you. From our perspective, we have 10,000 qualified households on our wait list at any time. Um, and what we've seen in the past with the capacity in the RE plan is that it just varies wildly. And this can be really tough when, you have thousands of people waiting for a program or hoping for access to a program. And so, being able to like provide that like baseline consistency, just helps in like messaging the program and also just legitimacy because a lot of times it does come off as a scam. And if you're like, well, look, this program's been around for this long and every year there's this much capacity available, it's a lot easier to kind of message and also, help people feel, that they may actually access the program at some time.
And so does that translate to one of these options for you over the other? Like, I don't hear you saying explicitly set the capacity amounts, but I think that's where you're headed. Or are you thinking more along the lines of maybe what Mike or James were suggesting around like some kind of floor? To either you have a perspective on either of those options?
Yeah, I think the floor is a great idea. And also just making sure that capacity can be rolled over if it's not used. I definitely just think that like putting it in the formal filing can make it vary so wildly, and that's what we've seen in the past. And I think that was like this bill's intention is to have a guaranteed consistent capacity.
And on the last piece of the comment that you made in the chat here around IQ households being less likely to be able to comment in a formal filing, that also lends itself presumably to doing something in the rulemaking around capacity levels. Is that where you were going?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, when you're in those formal like filings, there's not IQ representation necessarily. Like, there's definitely organizations who are pushing for that, but it's not a lot of IQ customers who are in there and able to like advocate.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Ryan, back to you if you still have a comment.
I'll just add briefly. I think, yeah, Berlin raises excellent points around what Philip was saying around like thinking through what is the purpose of this and letting that, if we're moving forward, thinking through like this comes in a litigated proceeding, whether the ERP or the customer program filing. Like we're about to file a big combined customer program filing this summer. That doesn't include our renewable energy programs, but everything else. And so it could fit well in that, and you can kind of contextualize these renewable energy programs and in regards to all of our customer programs and see how they're similar and where they're different and cost. But if you put in the ERP, you're looking at it from like a system-wide perspective. And we actually included our renewable energy programs in our ERP last time. Just because then you can look at, okay, well, what does this community solar program cost in relation to a utility scale or a larger solar installation? And what are the emissions benefits between the two, or how do they compare? And so, putting it in the ERP context can provide some really, good data points too. So just wanted to call that out. I think it was a good call out by Philip. Thanks.
And Ryan, when you brought up the customer program filing or customer program filings, but you're not suggesting we put it in there. You're saying there could be value because depending on what the goal is, but it might make more sense in the ERP for the reasons you described. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I think if I had to like make a decision right now, I think in my mind like the ERPs would be an appropriate spot. But honestly, there's pros and cons to both. I'd be interested in hearing others' thoughts too. And I don't think we're not hard dead set on either of those.
Okay, thank you. Mike,
Yeah,
back to
thanks,
you.
Corey.
Yeah, I guess what I would add is just listening to the conversation. I think, the 4-year pace it sounds pretty reasonable to, help build that kind of predictability. I'm not sure about the ERP for a variety of reasons. But I mean, don't hold me to it necessarily. It's we're still kind of thinking this through, but I'd be concerned. I think so I don't remember who brought it up earlier, but it kind of gets lost in a pretty good size proceeding there. But also just to continue to emphasize that community solar brings value, many different types of value. It really shouldn't just be to boil down to a cost type of scenario, like you would in an ERP with comparing portfolios and coming up with a preferred portfolio. So I'd be a little concerned that it would get caught up in that kind of conversation. But I do like a longer, kind of like a 4-year lead period or kind of proceeding there.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else in the room who hasn't had an opportunity to share, want to share a perspective here, either about the venue or about the options that we've outlined here, or even some of the suggestions. I think we have some additional nuance to the options that we've outlined on this slide around floors or litigated versus non-litigated. And from the PUC team, any additional questions you guys want to ask the group while we're still on this topic? Okay. Well, it seems like we're still relatively far apart on perspectives here, but there's actually more nuance to some of the options here than we had been, or that we incorporated into this slide. I also hear folks want to kind of take back some of the things that they heard around maybe customer program filing could be helpful. The to what extent the ERP process could support handling this program writ large. Uh, uh, the number whether we go with A, B, or C or some variation, how many program years a utility proposal or the rules should cover to provide certainty both to customers and to developers. And I think we heard a variation on this, like established numerical capacity amounts when we first started out about maybe a floor with an additional process to consider, or a floor of capacity with some additional process to consider whether whether that additional capacity really gets adopted or approved based on the remaining capacity from previous years, or some additional process to add additional capacity if that's what's needed. I think we also heard a few other ideas for if we were to use the rules to establish the criteria for utilities to consider when proposing some additional things like grid value, not just cost, to be included. I heard in terms of venue, folks want to think about the ERP customer program filing could be appropriate. There's a little bit more, I would say, sounds like less certainty that the res plan is going to be the right place for this is how I might characterize it. And please tell me if I'm characterizing that wrong, just given some of the potential coming statutory changes. We didn't get as far into like what should be included in a utility capacity level proposal. Although I think we've touched on a number of those ideas. I may leave it here, just looking at the time, and since it sounds like discussion is sort of dried up, but I wanna before I do that, make sure that there aren't any final comments or additional thoughts, or additional options that maybe we haven't considered that we should consider, either for venue or for uh, the specific options.
Corey, I have another venue idea, possibly that could be like a best of both worlds kind of. The the renewable energy standard, even if utility will opt out of that set of requirements, person to the PUC sunset bill, the utility will still have to do annual reports on distributed generation and customer facing programs. Maybe we could say every 4 year that annual report has to include this a new proposal for capacity for a 4 year period or something. Just since community solar gardens and inclusive community solar is a retail distributed generation program, so it's something that would have to be reported on in that annual report anyway, and we would also have to apply, utilities would have to apply for utility commission according to opting out of the rest rules if we change customer programs intended to address like bill impacts and stuff like that, which I think inclusive community solar probably qualifies as. So that's just another possible venue that would be if the rest continued, kind of. Yeah. I hope you know what I mean here.
I do. Would that be so? If I am remembering correctly off the top of my head, staff then responds to those reports if that's the report that you're referring to. So would that then lead to a litigated process? It might. I think what I'm getting at is it might.
Yeah, that's honestly that's a
Yeah.
good point. Yeah, I haven't thought it entirely
Okay.
through. It just popped up to me, but yeah, it's probably true that that would change the character of that proceeding. And honestly, we might prefer to not do that and just insert the inclusive community solar determination in an already litigated process. I think that's a really good point.
Okay. No bad ideas, everybody. We're working through this together, so I appreciate the engagement. One last call for comments, and then I think we'll close out this discussion. This has been really gotten some really good suggestions here and things to think through. And we will go to our break for 10 minutes. Okay. Hearing nothing additional, we're gonna go to our 10-minute break. I think we'll start it at 30 minutes after the hour. So we'll come back at 2:40. And appreciate everybody hanging in. I know we've got a few topics ahead of us, but it's been a really good conversation thus far. So we'll see you in 10 minutes, okay? All right, everyone. I hope you had a nice few minutes there. Get some coffee or tea or water, clear your mind. We're gonna jump back into it. Um, if folks can give me a thumbs up or something and let me know that you're there, that would be great. Everybody might still be on break, but if you can hear my voice, thank you, Blake. Thank you, Kate. All right. Sounds like folks are coming back. So our next two topics relate to renewable energy credits and their treatment in the context of the Inclusive Community Solar Program, and then utility reporting and information sharing. We'll start with treatment of renewable energy credits. There's a few pieces to this. So Section 4F of the Inclusive Community Solar Statute provides that the subscriber organization retires RECs generated by the community solar facility on behalf of the subscriber in the year the electricity is generated. It goes on to say the subscriber organization shall transfer any RECs for unsubscribed energy to the utility. It seems clear from this language that RECs from subscribed electricity can't be used for renewable energy standard compliance, for example. But it seems a little bit less clear about what happens with the unsubscribed electricity or unsubscribed electricity and the RECs for that electricity. So we have a question here about, do we need to provide any additional clarity around unsubscribed energy and the associated RECs? I did also want to highlight that the way that RECs are treated as part of this program does seem different than the way that RECs were treated under the prior community solar program in Colorado. And I wondered if anybody wanted to share any, how they kind of see the shift or any information that would be helpful around the implications of that shift. And then we have had folks ask both about that REC treatment question more generally and then about res compliance. Existing commission rules do specify which RECs can be used for res compliance and oriented really around the contractual basis. So RECs acquired pursuant to renewable energy supply contracts, REC contracts, or acquired via a standard offer program. ICS is a standard offer program. I'm not sure if that's exactly what this is referring to, or if folks understand that a little bit differently. So kind of big picture question here about what we need to do in the rules to clarify, especially the unsubscribed energy and how RECs are treated. Open up the floor too if there's other things we need to talk about with respect to RECs and how this works or how it should work or what we need to clarify in the rules as well. And I will open the floor to anybody who wants to comment. Philip.
Corey, I'll buy. I know I've asked the question, what happens to the RECs? This seems different than the CSG program before. Yeah, maybe I'm just a little optimistic here, but I don't know if it is completely clear to me that just because the subscriber organization has to retire the REC, that the utility still can't use them for compliance, and then it's just the subscriber organization that retires them. We buy the renewable electricity from the facility, and as part of a standard offer. And as with other programs of this like the CSG program, and generally speaking, when we buy the renewable electricity, we usually get the rights to the RECs that comes with that electricity. So I don't. I'm sorry for not, making your job easier. I don't know that I don't need elaboration on this in the rules, at least. I might be optimistic that we still could use the ICS for res compliance if needed.
Okay, so let's test that assumption a bit, or talk about that assumption a bit about the subscribed electricity, and then we can move on to unsubscribed. Because I guess the way that I read this is if you're retiring, so if a subscriber organization is retiring the renewable energy credits on behalf of the customer, then if the utility is also accounting for those renewable credits as part of the res compliance, unless there is some additional step contractual relationship between where the retirement is happening and where the compliance claim is happening, aren't you double counting that renewable energy credit?
I guess there is a risk for that if we don't like get this straight, and we don't want to double count Rex in any way. That doesn't make any sense to us. I was just thinking, the rec is generated by the inclusive community solar facility and is ascribed to the subscribers, or is assigned to the subscribers according to their share of the facility. That's my understanding, at least. So each person owns a small part of a rec. And then at the end of the year, the inclusive community solar subscriber organization will retire the rec of the subscribers. I just don't know if there is no possibility for a step there where the subscribers who has the right to the rec is assigned it based off of, on their share of the facility, um, sells that to the utility with the electricity that they sell to us. Does that make sense?
I think so, and I guess I would look to some of the subscriber organizations in the room for how you are thinking about this or how it tends to work or has worked. If I guess it doesn't apply to the previous program, but how you envision it working um, when you go and retire a rec on behalf of a subscriber. Is there room for a sale of that fraction of a rec, or is it pretty straightforward?
Yeah, what if the yeah, I mean, if what if does this mean that the subscriber efficiently doesn't have, the right to use the rec, or to sell it if they would desire so, because it has to be retired by the subscriber organization, or is it only if there are, unused recs sitting with the subscribers at the end of the year, then the subscriber organization has to retire them. I don't know. It's a maybe it's an optimistic question here, but it's a question.
Thoughts from others?
I guess I'm wondering um, if there's a reason why subscribers should not receive compensation for the credits they earned.
When, yeah, I'm open to, I think this is these issues are good for the group to talk about. I don't want to um, weight the conversation, but yeah, I would be curious to hear how is that process of retiring on behalf of the customer expected to work? Is there compensation to the customer for the rec part of it, or is it simply from the subscriber organization, for example, or is it simply retiring it for the environmental credits on behalf of the customer subscriber?
I'm sorry, were you asking me that?
No, I was asking the room. It was a good question, Jimmy.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know if other developers or subscription coordinators have more experience than us, but from Ampion's perspective, this is a pretty unique requirement for the recs to actually be retired on behalf of subscribers. We haven't dealt with a requirement like that very much. There are scenarios where the recs are retired or are taken over by the utility in exchange for incentive compensation, and there are other models where the recs remain with the developer to do what they may with, but but I don't have a lot of experience with this particular model, and I think I'm interested to see how it will play out. But unfortunately, I don't know where else we can build off of. Maybe Oregon, if anyone has experience in Oregon, I think they have a similar rule.
Thank you, Beckett. Yeah, no, it's actually I'm glad we're having this conversation because it's good to know if there is a lack of clarity on how this is intended to go, then maybe we actually do need to provide that clarity in the rules, both about subscribed and unsubscribed. And we could look to other states like Oregon if it's applicable there, or we may need to work through so a specific set of procedures here for what's allowed. I'm curious. I don't know if folks are hesitant to talk here because they're just not sure, um, or if there's we're kind of misunderstanding or mischaracterizing some of this and are not sure where to start. Okay. I think
Hey,
this
Corey.
sounds like, oh yeah, go ahead, James.
Sorry, this is just I think more for my own clarity about the discussion that you're seeking here and the input you're looking from us. So it seems like the rules, like the statute is fairly clear that for subscribed energy, the subscriber organization has the REC and has to retire it on behalf of the subscriber. So you're specifically wondering for the unsubscribed energy, where the statutory rules are fairly clear that the utility gets the REC, and you want to know then once the utility has the REC for that unsubscribed energy, whether or not they can use it for their RPS.
I think there's two pieces. You're right that there's two pieces here. I think we're actually talking about that first piece. We haven't quite gotten to unsubscribed energy yet. And the question is, yes, the statute seems pretty clear when it comes to the like, does the utility get the REC from subscribed energy? It sounds like there's maybe not as much clarity as I thought there might be about what it means for the subscriber organization to retire the REC on behalf of the subscriber. And some of the questions that seem to be coming up are, is the subscribe when that REC gets retired, is the subscriber being compensated for that REC or fraction of a REC? What it is, does the can there be a situation where the utility can be sold that REC or something like that, or use that REC for compliance, notwithstanding that the subscriber organization retires, and does that raise a risk of double counting? I think the answer is yes. And so I think those are the questions we're tackling now. The unsubscribed is the second part of that question, and we haven't focused quite as much on that just yet.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. I'll think more about that as this discussion goes on.
Okay, Kate, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't have a clear answer, but and maybe this is just to, I think, restate what you've just said. But the way I am thinking about this, there are two issues. There's the question of what can be done with the REC, and then the second question of how does the community solar program interface with renewable energy requirements for utilities. I think the way I read this, typically requiring a REC to be retired means it can't be sold by the customer or, by the subscriber organization. I'm definitely not a legal expert on any of this, so not to say that it absolutely can't be, but that's just not how I've seen it interpreted. That being said, if the RECs are not sold to another entity, then I think you can assume they remain associated with those kilowatt hours of usage. And so you are avoiding that. The reason to retire them is to avoid potential for double counting. So the question becomes, how do you account for the fact that there are RECs associated with, say 100 kilowatt hours of usage for a customer who is participating in community solar program, and the utility does not then need to kind of doubly produce renewable energy. It would be double. It does not need to again, procure renewable energy to meet that, cover that energy usage for purposes of meeting the renewable energy standard. And so I wonder if there is a tracking mechanism that kind of recognizes that those, say, 100 kilowatt hours of usage for that customer, renewable energy has been procured to meet them because the REC was retired. It's not being double counted, and just ensure it's not creating making res compliance challenging because it appears as if those kilowatt hours have not been met with renewable energy. And then just to kind of tie the two together, I think, if customers' RECs are being retired in a way that supports compliance with the res and progress towards res goals, then it seems reasonable to compensate customers for that kind of benefit that's being provided by the retirement of the REC, even if whether it is retired or transferred to the utility. If it's meeting those goals, there's a value associated with that should be recognized.
Thanks, Kate. That was very well stated. I think a better encapsulation of what I was trying to get at in some ways. Let's go back to Philip.
Thanks. And yeah, Kate, that was really, really well put, and you highlighted some of the interesting conundrums in this. The subscribers usage is covered by renewable energy, but it doesn't get to count anywhere. So it'll have to be reversely double counted, and by the utility having to produce more distributed generation to comply with the rest. I hope I'm cautiously optimistic that there is a way, perhaps, where even though the subscriber organization retires the REC can still be counted towards utility compliance without it being used for anything else, obviously, so there's no double counting. If not, then it seems like there would be, honestly, no value to the RECs if they are tied with this individual subscriber and cannot be sold, cannot be used for compliance, and then will be retired at the end of the year. Then honestly, there's kind of no point to them being there as an accounting entity. An alternative, Corey, that you and the PUC team can think about is, maybe we don't have to make rules for, or rather maybe wouldn't be in the rules for the inclusive community solar that this accounting thing belongs. Maybe this could be in addition to the renewable energy standard rules, where it, for example, could say RECs generated at an inclusive community solar facility and retired by the utility at the end of the year will be counted towards the utility's RES compliance for that year. That's just, I don't know if that's a more or less elegant way of going about this. I think as long as the core issue of there will be no double counting anywhere, as long as that's the standard, otherwise no solution will work. Then maybe making an addition to the RES rules could be an easier way to get the clarity we need on this matter.
And just to make sure I'm not getting wrapped up in the details, so that if we were to adjust the res rules in the way that you're describing, that would address use of subscribed or unsubscribed electricity from community solar facilities for res compliance, but it wouldn't necessarily address the who gets compensated or does anyone get compensated for the REC. Is that am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's difficult to say since the REC doesn't have any value if it's not used for compliance anywhere or can't be sold with any kind of purpose. Then it's worth nothing. Then it's honestly just a burden because someone has to pay for a license to register in Regis and to retire them. I don't. I mean, I would probably maybe look to the community solar garden framework that already exists, where I know that utilities do get RECs from those facilities. Honestly, I am unsure if there's like a separate um, contract or something like that. So it's like, a separate line item basically in terms of the value of the rec, or if it is included as part of the overall subscriber benefit. Yeah, I think that's maybe I hope we can mirror something there that would make it clear that the subscriber, I mean, is the one getting the benefit out of the community solar facility. I think that's quite clear as these things produce power as like 2 or 4 times the cost of a larger solar facility that other customers will have to pay for. So
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. And there's this additional, like when we talk about the unsubscribed portion, what that word shall transfer. I think I also was one like, is the transfer a sale or does it just go automatically to the utility? Sort of a separate but related question.
yeah, it's a good question. I don't think I have a good answer, but I also don't think that I mean, we've been doing community solar gardens, which for this specific case is the same thing of like community solar facility generating recs. We haven't had any unsubscribed energy from any of those, I think ever. So I don't know how we would do that. I think it would be very, very rarely used that rule.
Okay. Morgan, let's go to you next.
Yeah, I do just want to make sure that we're including that there are probably customers that will have value in having the rec retired on their behalf. Any anchor tenant, corporate customers who have their own renewable compliance goals will have value in keeping those recs to themselves as well.
Okay, so I think we heard before that makes sense, Morgan. That's a good reminder that it's not all necessarily residential customers who might not be able to actually use a rec or sell a rec, for example. There could be other larger commercial corporate customers who may in fact want to use the rec for their own compliance. Other it sounds like we have a little bit of work to do here on this point. Berlin, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is really hard for us, the subscriber organization language here. I mean, we don't handle recs. We're not a generating organization. I think this makes sense if you're like an owner that's also a subscriber organization. But for us, like the kilowatt hours aren't touching us. So yeah, I think this is like a really challenging piece of this.
And if you're able to share, are there, I guess, how have you been thinking that you might approach this? And maybe you don't know yet, so
Yeah, I think in the current program, we get a lot of questions from people. Like some subscribers are thinking about climate and they're like, can I say that my house is powered by clean energy? And that's typically where like you can't claim, technically that you're powering your house with clean energy. And I think that's kind of maybe where this came from is like giving the subscribers an opportunity to be like, I I power my house with clean energy. And so I think like in that way, that's how we've been thinking about it is like if you're in this program, like, yeah, you can say that. Whereas before you couldn't.
okay. That's helpful context. James.
Yeah, I mean, just tracking the conversation, sounds like the subscriber organization should have the first crack at claiming the rec value, be that subscribe retiring it on behalf of a customer who wants it to be claimed just by the customer, the residential customer who wants to say they're 100% clean, or C&I customers that want to use that claim to satisfy their own emissions or clean energy goals, but that, for other RECs that aren't being, necessarily used by the customer on whose behalf it's being retired, then there certainly could be value in letting the utility use that for their RPS compliance and getting some enhanced value for everyone that way.
Thank you, James. Okay, so this has been very helpful. I think I'm hearing, and that was a good distillation, James. I think I'm hearing we kind of need to work through, and maybe this goes in the rules, some clarity on what a subscriber organization can do when the customer is not necessarily using the rec. And then on top of that, for subscribed electricity, and then on top of that, what the utility can do for both subscribed and unsubscribed energy in the case we have that at some point. And we want to account for the fact that a subscriber may have use for the RECs themselves. We want to account for who's being compensated for what, to the extent that there's any compensation, and whether, how that shows up for the subscriber, if at all. And then I hear you, Philip, on the maybe this is a res rules question and not a ICS question, and we can think about that as well. Any other comments on this before we move on?
I just have one more comment. Just reading the context section here, the language from statute about shall, I'm not a lawyer, but it raises the question to me whether we were even allowed to do anything other than, kind of the first scenario that James laid out, retiring it on someone's behalf. But putting that aside for a minute, I do think we would have to think through the compensation if the rec was to be transferred and retired on behalf of Excel. To my understanding, that isn't something that is contemplated in the rules because it doesn't seem to be the intent of the program. And I just want to raise that point, or I don't know if others have thoughts about that.
I feel like the question here, I think in my opinion, you're right. That's what the statute says. It does have to be retired on behalf of the customer. So the question that I hear being raised here is whether, given that those subscribers are also utility customers, by a subscriber organization retiring the rec on behalf of a subscriber that isn't otherwise using the environmental credit, can Excel claim that for their RPS. So it is being retired on behalf of their customer, but it is a utility customer. So is there an ability to claim some credit for that on the RPS side?
Thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Good clarification.
Thank you both. And the one thing I think I forgot to say in my summary too is just I hear you, Berlin, about kind of the challenges for a subscriber organization needing to do the retirement in general. And I don't know what, if anything, we can do about that given the way the statute is written, but it's helpful to hear a little bit about the kind of practical perspective there. Looking at the time, I think we should keep moving here. It sounds like we'll take back this feedback on Rex and think about what additional clarity we can provide or what additional questions we have for the formal rulemaking about this. We're going to move next to utility reporting and information sharing. So some community solar developers have indicated that additional information about approved projects and available ICS capacities that's provided publicly on the utilities websites would help streamline implementation. Some of the things, and we took a look at some examples from other states and what had been suggested, but for example, the type of information that could be helpful, information about the actual projects that have been allocated capacity, name, location, the amount of capacity, how much of a given project, or perhaps totally for the program as well, has been allocated to income qualified subscribers for a particular project, when it was accepted into the program, and then when actual when commercial operation or substantial completion is for a given project, um, which may be helpful potentially for prospective subscribers. Separately, we've also heard folks in this process express interest in having kind of consolidated information somewhere about inclusive community solar subscription capacity, separate from about the approved projects. And we had a bit of a discussion in our community input meetings about what is sort of the role of the utility in providing that information versus the role of subscriber organizations or even another entity in providing that, given that it's really the subscriber organizations interfacing with the customers and not the utility. I want to start by focusing more on the first bullet around website information, and it would be helpful to hear a little bit more, perhaps from the development or subscriber organization community that's on the call, about like how how having additional information on the website can help support improved implementation. Would also love to hear from Excel or Black Hills folks in the room about, I think, given that this is a relatively new program, is the information currently on your websites about this program the plan, or is there plan to add additional information? Would you have any concerns or see any challenges associated with adding some of the information about approved projects and available capacity? And then finally, what do you all see as the commission's role in ensuring that the utilities provide information that's adequate and timely about inclusive community solar programs in their service territories? James.
Yeah, I'm happy to kick this one off. Because we've talked about this before. I think all the data points that you listed there would all be extremely helpful information to have shared on the utility websites about the program. I can point to examples in other states like Virginia, for example, with Dominion and Appalachian Power over there, where their community solar landing pages provide this level of information that's refreshed on an ongoing basis. This is just really important information for developers to have when they are trying to develop projects in the state. It takes a long time to go from to prospect sites, get site control, go through the interconnection process, secure all the permits needed to enter into the program. And in order for companies to make that level of investment in terms of time and money and staff, they need a line of sight into how much capacity there is in the program. So we know how much capacity overall has been approved, but we don't have any visibility right now into how much remains, how much capacity has been claimed, and how much remains to be claimed. So having that publicly available would just increase the transparency in this market and let everyone know how much, what the market size is, so they can plan and develop accordingly. I'd note, in addition to that example I just mentioned in Virginia, Excel's landing page for the AVPP program has similar types of information out there in terms of approved capacity and remaining capacity there. So, I think that there's already some good work being done here. So, I would look to that and maybe look to the the Virginia examples as good templates for what this could look like for ICS.
Thank you, James. That was a helpful kind of teasing out why this information is helpful. Before we go to the utilities, I just wanted to, James, I heard you speaking maybe more on behalf of the developers than the subscription organization. So I just want to make sure, is there a different perspective or additional things to consider from like a subscriber organization perspective rather than a developer perspective about why this information would be helpful?
There probably is, and it's not coming to mind right now. Other than just the same general issue, subscriber organizations and developers, need to be able to plan out their activities and know kind of what the pipeline might look like for moving potential subscribers off the waiting list and linking them over to programs, linking them over to projects. They need to see how much capacity is out there to be able to do that type of subscriber matching.
Okay. Yeah, that I think that was the missing piece I was wondering about. And to be I was also asking the rest of the group, not just James. So if there's another subscriber organization or developer perspective here, please speak up now before I call on Antoinette. Okay. Let's go to Antoinette and then we'll go to Philip. I think you're muted still. Antoinette, I think you're muted.
I certainly was. Thank you. I was just going to kind of chime in on what James was talking about. And on the ICS landing page at Excel, we do have some information about projects and capacity allocated, but it's not as available as some of the examples you presented, James, for Appalachian and Dominion. And I've talked to marketing and our product team, and it looks like we can create those kinds of tables with that kind of information, James. So it's certainly something we're planning on improving on our website. I did have a question about some of those bullets in the capacity allocated to IQ customers. I can kind of see where for planning purposes, it's important to understand the pipeline, but not so much. I don't understand the need for the capacity allocated to IQ customers and wanted to understand a little bit more about the reason for that point.
Does James, do you want to respond or does somebody want to respond kind of like is that data point, how that data point supports project development? I could see from an oversight perspective why that might be helpful, but just curious from a developer subscriber organization perspective.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
The point under context here, capacity allocated to income qualified customers, how does that piece in particular, does that help with the development process too? Or is that as necessary as some of these other pieces?
It's probably less necessary from a developer, just for some of those critical things I was talking about before about knowing how much program capacity is left. That's less critical. So it is something that other states do share. So I think it would be good just public information to make that available. But from my perspective, probably less mission critical in terms of just knowing what the total addressable market is.
That helps. Thank you. But anyway, that's our perspective at Excel is definitely looking to make that information more visible on our landing page.
Yeah, and if I can hop in real quick,
go ahead.
If I can hop in real quick on why that information may be important on the development side. I do know that we get many questions during the permitting process about the programs and the benefits of the programs. So having those types of aggregate numbers would be helpful in those conversations.
Thank you, Morgan. And maybe I'll just, if I may, before going to you, Philip, if you still have a comment, is just to, I'm just looking, maybe Berlin or someone from EOC or I'm just wondering if there's any other perspectives on that, like when you engage with income qualified customer, like is this something that subscribers find helpful, or better just for kind of planning purposes?
I think sometimes it's helpful for subscribers. I think the hard part is like, is the information up to date and accurate? A lot of times when we're working on a project, we have to subscribe it, well before it comes online. And so it's often like full before it gets to the utility website. And then, yeah, if there's like, too much information, it's constantly changing. Um,
Let's go to Philip, and then I may have a follow-up for you, Blaine, because you raised some good points there.
Sure, Corey. Yeah, Berlin, that's a good point about the project really often being fully subscribed before they hit our website. We also have a landing page for the community solar garden program. We will make one for the inclusive community solar program as well, with information of awarded projects, and also like the standard offers that we're doing. I'm sure it could be better than it is in terms of keeping information updated and all that. And I think, to your point, James, it would make a lot of sense to have, with the information material for each individual offering, like make sure to put set that in a context, make sure to include information about these gigawatts are dedicated this year. There's further or megawatts are there further X megawatts planned in this period, after which the commission will make a new determination, or whatever. But to make sure to get that information out there, for the visibility of the developers, I can see that perspective for sure.
So so it sounds like there's some convergence here. I hear Antoinette and Philip saying we don't you don't necessarily see challenges and you in fact maybe even plan to add at least some of this information to your websites. Berlin, you kind of raised the question, that's a good one, about how often this information would need to be updated for it to be useful for developers or subscriber organizations or the public. And so I wanted to touch on that and see if there's any additional thoughts on how that might go, or how, is this when a developer applies or enters the standard offer, do they know all of this information? If it changes over time, how to account for that?
Yeah, I think some of the examples in the chat are good examples of like what projects are out there. I think what's maybe more helpful is having information about subscriber organizations, or like where to get on a wait list to sign up. And then maybe those subscriber organizations can say like, yeah, we have a wait list or we have openings. Like an easy way to change the status. Solar United Neighbors has a pretty good one for Colorado in terms of like subscriber organizations and like what utilities they serve. But I think like getting subscribers connected to the subscriber organization or like the actual wait list or sign up page is like the easiest thing to share out, at least from a customer perspective.
Yeah, and it leads us back, I think, to the who owns what information question piece, and maybe that's what you're going to go to, Philip. Why don't I let you respond?
Yeah, you're right. It is that point. I was about to say who gets to decide which subscriber organization is at the top of the list on our website. What are we liable for if for not capturing all the potential subscriber organizations? Isn't that an unfair, competitive advantage really that the utility would potentially give, like inadvertently, but just by not knowing all the possible subscriber organizations out there? I see a lot of risk that the utility would be doing a job that is not really the utilities, it's marketing of the subscriber organizations. So I would be afraid that we're not the best agent to do the job, and that the cost associated with doing that job is kind of unfairly put on all customers. If there is a desire to, I can of course from the consumer perspective, it would be great if they would just get an email with like, bling, these are the things or whatever. But I am unsure if the utility is the best agent to do it. Either it could be a PUC thing if you guys take responsibility for fair competition and for ensuring that all subscriber organizations who want are on there, and I don't know, rotate being top of the list or whatever. That's none of my business, but I would prefer to keep it not the business of the utility company to market the subscriber organizations.
When someone applies for capacity under this program, are the subscriber organizations known at that time? Like, do you just have the name of, is the applicant name just the developer, or do you also know who the subscriber organization is associated with that project?
I don't think I could tell you right now. I would have to look into that. Maybe some of the PSCo people know that better.
Or
Yeah,
some
I
of the
could.
developers or others, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in on that one. Just from our perspective, so we have for inclusive community solar, a developer or subscriber organization would request capacity within the program. So our relationship is to the developer or the garden owner, the subscriber organization, whatever you want to call it. And then the developer, the subscribers organization is responsible to go out and acquire subscribers to enroll in the garden. And so when they enroll, we don't know what subscribers will be in the garden. Obviously they'll be our customers, but we don't know them. So once the garden gets closer to permission to operate, that's when the subscriber organization would actually start enrolling customers, likely start enrolling customers. And so yeah, I think, kind of to what was said earlier, I think that acquiring subscribers is more on the role of the developer, the subscriber organization.
Okay. Yeah, I think what I was getting at, I was just wondering, and Gina, Beckett, I see your hands. I'll come to you in just a moment. I was just wondering if by providing the applicant name or the name of the entity who has received capacity under the program, if you're also providing the name of the subscriber organization, if that's a way of getting at, hey, we have these approved projects, and these are the folks that are running them, and it kind of gets at the same thing that you were getting at, Berlin, but without saying here's a bunch of vetted, all of the whole entire universe of vetted subscriber organizations to choose from. It's just the ones that already have projects, essentially.
I don't know if Gina was going to address this specific question, but I do have a clarifying point on this one. Gina, if you wanted to address this one, I'm happy to let you go first.
Hey, I'm not Gina. I'm Rick Garcia, but like Gina, I'm a consultant to the Latino Community Foundation of Colorado. And I do have a comment, part question as well, as it relates to the reporting pieces. It seems there's a sizable allocation of capacity with this program to IQ and DIC customers. Maybe this is implicit, but who is doing the tracking and reporting as to how and how quickly those communities subscribers are becoming users of that capacity. Who actually is going to be tracking that? Is that built in already, or is that something that needs to be considered?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, and it's a good one, it might be more appropriate for our next topic, which is talking about the reporting that is required, or the reporting method that is required from subscriber organizations to the commission about the guaranteed discounts that they provide. And that could, I think, if I'm understanding correctly, almost the answer to the question of like uh how many income qualified customers are subscribed, or what discounts are they being provided? What are the benefits to income qualified customers across subscriber organizations?
Yeah, certainly. I think that's part of the expectation, but it just seems with a 51% capacity requirement, someone needs to be looking at that routinely to ensure that's being met, or if it's not being met, what can be done to improve it or mitigate it. That's my point.
And this may change depending on the venue, but and someone may have to refresh my memory on whether there are any kind of annual reporting requirements from the utility regarding anything on community solar, or whether that would be a part of the litigated process of looking at the performance of the program for the prior period in order to think about any changes that need to happen for the next period. That's the other place I could see that oversight happening. Okay, Beckett, let's go to you. And I think we will come back to that oversight piece in our next session here as well. So don't, I definitely heard that suggestion.
Thank you, Corey. This is more of just a clarifying point about your comment. You were referring to subscription coordinate or subscriber organizations and developers seemingly differently, or as two different entities. And from my point of view, so Ampion we consider ourselves a subscription manager. So we contract with a developer who we consider the subscriber organization to perform, acquisition, allocation, interfacing with the utilities. I think both a subscriber organization is defined in statute and a subscription coordinator is defined in statute. And I just want to be clear what you were referring to when you said, is the subscriber organization known at the time of interconnection? Or
Yeah, and you'll have to correct me if I have a misconception here. My understanding is that sometimes the developer and the subscriber organization or subscription manager may be the same entity, and sometimes they may not be the same entity. And so what I was saying is when you see the project applicant name on the left here, that could just refer to the developer, or it could refer to both the developer and the subscriber organization, subscription manager, subscription coordinator. But am I misunderstanding? Is the developer always the same entity, or a different entity rather?
The way I think about it is the developer and the subscriber organization is generally the same entity. That would be the developer. And then the subscription coordinator could perform the duties that we perform, or they could perform those duties by themselves. And so, I think the subscriber organization would be known unless they sell the project. But the subscription coordinator or subscriber coordinator would not be known. I don't know if that helps clarify anything.
Yeah, it does. Antoinette, let's go to you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, from my perspective, the subscriber coordinator really is the one who does subscription enrollment, subscription management, and the subscriber organization can truly be the developer of the project. And so we would definitely have visibility into the subscriber organization through the application process, but we may not know the subscriber coordinator if it's different than the subscription organization. So my understanding, Beckett, is very much as you've described it, I believe.
And so the implication of this is that it's not possible, or at least it's not easy to put up the name of the like subscriber contact, right? Who would
Right.
actually be enrolling subscribers, because it's not known at the time the project is approved.
Right. And it seemed to me that really the idea is to help developers understand the capacity left in the program. And this might be a little different, Berlin, than the point you were making, but originally what we had talked about is wanting developers or subscriber organizations to understand the capacity remaining in the program. And so, I mean, I guess I was thinking about it as a subscription organization or subscriber organization reaches interconnection agreement and signs one, they would go on that list in the order in which they signed the interconnection agreement, is the way I was thinking about it. So I'm not sure if there were other thoughts on that.
That seems reasonable or consistent with sort of the some of the data that's provided here as example, like the data project acceptance, in terms of what's being listed. And maybe that gets even more specific about the date that you sign the agreement or something like that. But it does seem like we're talking about two separate use cases almost here for this information. The kind of developer subscriber organization, helping them plan and for what's available or what's remaining and what's already available. And then as a subscriber, how do I find a list of folks that I need to go to enroll? And it sounds like I'm hearing agreement generally around the former, as that it would be appropriate and possible for the utilities to provide that information. And I don't know if it's disagreement or just we still need to figure out the right or to work through, the right entity to host something along the lines almost of what you shared, Berlin, as an example from Solar United Neighbors, that's more geared toward providing information about how to enroll to customers. Beckett.
I think looking at the way Maryland does this may be helpful. They kind of attack both of these questions through two different avenues. That you go to the utility website and they basically post what Antoinette was referring to. It's a list of accepted projects, and you can view the queue there. And then the Maryland Energy Administration separately hosts a spreadsheet that kind of shows a broader picture of like all the approved projects and subscriber organizations and the subscription coordinators and their contact information. I think the catch there is that in Maryland, there's a requirement that subscriber organizations report during like over a certain cadence after they are approved with like a report to the commission and MEA, so they have access to that information. I'm not sure that such a requirement exists in Colorado, so that we may have to think through how that information would get to whatever entity hosted that source. But just flagging, taking a look at what the Maryland utilities do and what the Maryland Energy Administration posts may be helpful.
Thank you, Beckett. That's a good reminder, because I was looking at that website and I see Naomi. I don't want to put you on the spot. I do see the Colorado Energy offices here. So maybe just a request, maybe we need to have another discussion or to think about, whether maybe this, like the interface between potential subscribers and the subscription coordinators goes beyond what the commission can really do in rules, but maybe there's someone like the Colorado Energy Office that has more appetite or ability to provide that kind of connective tissue.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. And hi, everyone. This is Naomi at the Energy Office. I think I wasn't able to attend the prior sessions, but I was listening to the recordings, and it sounded like this topic had come up of like potentially the Energy Office could be an aggregator for this information. I just think, and I do understand the concerns, and I think like definitely open to brainstorming how to get around that. I think at the moment, like we don't have the information to post because we're not necessarily tracking that. Um, and it also seems like it's something that's constantly changing. And so I wouldn't want to get into a cycle where we're posting out of date information that's then not helpful for customers. I guess one question I have is I know you have like the two different forms that you posted. Um, and I forgot what they're each called. One is like guaranteed discount reporting, and then um, the the second form too. And I'm wondering like could either of those reporting venues be a way for the PUC to gather that information and then make it available to the public?
Maybe, but I do have concerns about whether that for some of the reasons that have been raised too about whether that is really our role either, or should be our role. So we can that is on our radar though, because like you said, it's come up a few times, and I think we've had a few discussions about like this third bullet here, right? Like what is our role on that front, and what is our role separately on ensuring that some of this other information from the utility is shared. I don't have a good answer for you now other than to say maybe it warrants a follow-up conversation between our two offices to talk about what that could look like.
Yeah, I'm definitely happy to chat. And I think just another consideration, which I think would apply for both the PUC and the Energy Office, would just be staffing capacity and whether like we really have the bandwidth to be able to support this type of information sharing.
Yeah. Okay, I just have one last question, and then I think we should go to our break so we can come back for our last topic of the day. Um, Berlin, you shared that list. I haven't looked at it yet. But you shared that list from Solar United Neighbors, and I guess I'm wondering, does the list that we're talking about actually already exist? And it's just a matter of who's sharing it, or are we actually talking about different information that would be shared by whichever entity? Like, is that Solar United Neighbors the list anyway?
I think it's pretty close, but it may not be capturing everyone and every project. I also think Excel has a list of projects on their website, that also lists who the subscriber organization is and whether there's a wait list or not, but I don't know how often that gets updated. Um, I yeah, it's just really hard because it's so it's it's not aggregated in one place and there's not one entity. The struggle in Colorado is we don't have a state program administrator, a third party administrator who can, be the point of contact for all of these organizations and like the one-stop resource. Um, yeah, so I think the information is out there and I don't think it would be that hard to get. You know, I think anyone who's developing a project would happily point to like where you sign up. And I think that's what, Solar United Neighbors was trying to like get at is like, if you have projects available, please put them on our website. It's free to do so and is a resource. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think we will look into this a little bit more and have some follow-up conversations around this. It sounds like it actually sounds like we have some consensus around like the project and capacity and available capacity information that would go up on the utility website, and where we still need some clarity is on the like information about subscription coordinate, the information that customers would follow to figure out how to enroll or where to enroll. Is there any other, I guess the last kind of Beckett.
Sorry, I was gonna change topics a little bit, so feel free to go ahead.
I was just going to say to this third bullet, I mean, we've been sort of dancing around this, but just to ask it directly, like given the consensus that it seems like we're hearing around around information on the utilities website, is this something that we should be including in rules? The utility shall maintain a website that has X information on it. That seems to me to be the implication of the discussion, but just want to hear from anybody if there's trade-offs or concerns about that approach. Okay, hearing no concerns there. Beckett?
Thank you. Sorry for belaboring this section, but I just wanted to return quickly to my comment at the beginning of this session about historical usage data. I know it doesn't really fit within this type of utility reporting, but I think it's an important aspect of utility reporting. And just to reiterate, like one of the most important pieces of a successful community solar program from our point of view is having access to historical usage information for prospective subscribers so that we can ensure that we're providing the maximum allocation that we can, or the best allocation for their usage profile. So it's super useful up front, but also on an ongoing basis so that we can track changes in usage over time. And it would be super helpful for me to get an understanding from both Excel and Black Hills what data is available to us, and how we can make sure that we have the data that we need.
Phil?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and I understand why having the data would help you in your planning and in your business. I think the data is the customers, and I don't think there's anything preventing customers from, pulling their previous usage data. I think they can do that, themselves online. And I think you could, I don't know if that could be a part of, the application with you guys, that they, what do I know, upload last 12 months or whatever you guys need. I don't know, you figure that out. Whatever would be helpful for you guys. And then on the ongoing basis, I don't I don't know how we would do that, to be honest. I'm, yeah, open to other things. I guess you mean, once again, the customers, you could talk to them, but I'm guessing you would have a harder time getting them to resubmit data after they've subscribed when it's not, maybe feeling as natural as part of the application process. I don't think I have a good one for you there.
Beckett, go ahead if you want to respond. Otherwise, Antoinette, if you wanted to share anything from Excel's perspective.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I totally heard, and I would be interested in Excel's response because we're more active in Minnesota than Colorado, but I do believe that there's a portal that we have access to so long as customers sign a data consent form, giving us access to that portal. And I'm just curious whether the process is similar in Colorado as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you mentioned, Beckett, the data consent, and that's certainly something that we have. If you need to get historical data for a customer, they can submit a data consent so that we can provide the historical usage directly to you, or I think Philip mentioned that they can pull it themselves. So I'd be happy to look into that a little more with you if you had needs beyond that, but that's what I'm aware of.
Great. That's super helpful. I'll take that back to our team and reach out if we have further questions.
Awesome. Well, we're about 10 minutes overdue for our break, so why don't we take 10 minutes now, unless there's any final comments on utility reporting and information sharing, and we will come back for our last topic at the hour, 4 o'clock. Thank you all, and I'll see you shortly. All right, folks, thank you for hanging with us during this workshop. We are in our last hour here and on our last set of topics. We're going to be starting again in just a second. So if you are away from your computer, I hope you can hear my voice and it's calling you back. We're going to move on to our final topic of the day, which is subscriber organization reporting and expectations. There are two pieces to this topic, which I'm going to review. We have two slides here, and then we'll come back to the first piece and then address the second piece. So as a reminder for folks who aren't already familiar, Section 5B5 of the statute requires a subscriber organization or subscription coordinator to provide, at the Commission's request, details about the guaranteed discounts required by statute that they've granted to income qualified customers in a form to be determined by the Commission. I know some of you were a part of this process earlier this year, but we have adopted a guaranteed discount reporting form to serve that purpose. It is an Excel spreadsheet format and available on the Inclusive Community Solar Commission website. And it asks each subscriber organization or subscription coordinator to provide the following data for each income qualified subscriber that they've enrolled in the program. What is the facility, the community solar facility that they're subscribed to? What is that facility's discount eligibility? So what tax credits are they receiving that translate to the guaranteed discounts in the statute? What is the required discount associated with those tax credits that they receive? What is the discount that they're actually providing for each customer? And then what is the method used to verify income? And we don't ask, we just ask for, did you use self-attestation? Is it enrollment or eligibility for enrollment in one of the programs specified in statute? Or is it proof of residence in an affordable housing community is the third one. When we developed this form, I know there were some concerns or questions about how exactly it was going to be used and whether this was the final form, and also whether subscriber organizations and subscription coordinators have access to all of this information or whether the utility has access to some of this information. So we wanted to revisit that topic here a bit, and would be curious to hear, particularly from the subscriber organization, subscription coordinators in the room, whether they think the content of what we're asking for is reasonable, whether the format of what we're asking for, Excel spreadsheet, is workable, or if there's any challenges associated with that. And then we had also heard questions about the cadence of what the commission would require in terms of reporting. And so we wanted to throw out there, if we were to ask for reporting from subscription coordinators and subscriber organizations on a semi-annual basis, so 2 times per year, would that raise any concerns or challenges or undue burdens for those entities? And then finally, what process steps, if any, does the commission needs to consider including in the rules about this reporting process so that it's actually written down somewhere, and the context for all of this is that the commission does not regulate subscriber organizations or subscription coordinators just because they participate in the program. And so we're trying to think through what is kind of the appropriate structure and ask here. And last comment before I move to the next slide, and then we'll come back, is just I think this gets at the person who is Gina Del Castillo, whose name I forget, and I apologize. This is kind of getting at that oversight question that you asked earlier.
Yeah, Corey, Rick Garcia. Thank you.
Rick Garcia. Thank you. Aaron, let's go to the next slide and then we'll come back. The second piece of subscriber organization reporting and expectations revolves around a topic that came up a bit during some of our community input meetings, and that's the prohibited practices in statute, and what is the commission's role in ensuring that subscriber organizations comply with those, and whether those need any adjustment, additional safeguards or requirements to address some of what we've heard from stakeholders and communities around deceptive practices, potential scams, and or hidden fees. And again, here, some of the tension comes from the subscriber organizations not being subject to regulation by the commission. And so, one way that, if we agree that the commission does have a role in ensuring compliance with some of these prohibited practices or avoiding prohibited practices, do we need to be thinking about placing limits on, say, for example, the ability of the utility to contract with subscriber organizations that have like a history of complaints? Or is there an additional enforcement measure that we need to be considering here? So we're going to take these in turn. We'll start with the guaranteed reporting form and any commentary around that, and then we'll come back here to kind of the broader expectations and prohibited practices. Okay. On the guaranteed discount forms, I'm curious if anybody has any initial reactions to some of these questions that they ask. Hopefully you've seen in chat, I think Aaron posted the link for how to get to the guaranteed discount form reporting form if you want to see it directly. But I'll open the floor for any comments here. Let's try and take these in turn, and it may just be we're at the end of the day, and folks aren't quite sure about or need to think more about what needs to change here. But substance of the reporting form, for the subscriber organizations, subscription coordinators in the room, would you have any difficulty providing this information that's listed on the slide here? So the facility, specifically it's for each customer, the facility name, the facility address, the discount eligibility, and the required discount associated with that eligibility, the actual discount provided to the customer, and then the verification method. Are those all things that subscriber organizations and subscription coordinators anticipate they'll be able to have and report on? Berlin.
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. I think our questions would be around like time frame. And I think we chatted about this before before some of these workshops. But like uh would it be any subscriber that was on that facility during the reporting time frame, no matter how short the duration? Like someone might sign up and or be enrolled and then move after a month. And then in terms of like the discount provided, this should be pretty straightforward, but again, if it exceeds what's required or um maybe change, like I can't imagine it would change month to month. It's really hard to imagine this without like seeing the data from the utility. But again, it could change over time. And I've seen also projects have different tax statuses at different times as well. And that's not something like subscription coordinator might necessarily know because they apply more to like the subscriber organization or the developer or owner.
So how do we account for the facility tax credit status potentially changing over time, and how would we account for or clarifying the cutoff date for when we're asking for the information and recognizing that sometimes that information could change the following month or something like that.
Yeah, is it like a snapshot? Like if you request the report, like middle of the year, is it a snapshot of like what the garden looks like that month? Um, and then at the end of the year, like is it a snapshot of what the subscriptions are looking like at that time? Because the changes every minute.
I I am struggling with, and maybe you have some idea, but I think yes, that is how I had initially envisioned it, and so maybe that's a good place to start. That it's a snapshot in time. Um, if we were to do 2 times per year, for example, uh, or maybe the cadence of when we would be requesting it kind of gets at that. We recognize that things could change, but we want to be tracking over time, what the makeup of the program is at a given time or at set times during the year. Um, I don't know exactly how we would otherwise account for changing data over time unless without it being super burdensome. But maybe, like requiring you to update the data when things change, which does sound like it would add a lot of burden potentially. But curious if you, Berlin, or others have a different perspective about, um, snapshot versus kind of continuous framing for this.
I think for us, the snapshot would be the best option. It's going to be the easiest to generate is like who is valid at this point in time. Yeah.
Beckett?
Thanks, Corey. Two, I guess, points of clarification here. So if I'm reading the report correctly or the form correctly, there's one input per project, correct? So in this example, each line would represent an individual project. You'd put in the discount eligibility, the required discount associated with that, with whatever tax incentives they have, the discount provided in the verification method. And I guess if that is true, I have some concern about the verification method being one option. In my experience, I presume a single project could use various allowable verification methods to meet the requirement.
Yeah, Beckett, I don't want to interrupt you, but let me I think it's a little different than how you were describing. And
Okay. Yeah.
let me bring up the form here real quick,
Yeah.
Aaron, if I can take over the screen. So the way that we had set it up is actually you're reporting on a customer for each customer,
Got it.
which
Got it.
community solar facility. And so that
Yep.
self-attestation is specific to that customer.
Perfect. Understood.
Does
I
that
think
head off
most of
some of
my
your other?
questions are resolved. Yeah. And well, I guess the only one that may still be relevant, I assume we would only populate this with income qualified subscribers or all subscribers.
I think so. We're only asking, I think restricting it to customers that are receiving guaranteed discounts. So income qualified customers is how we had envisioned this rather than having
Yep.
you report a bunch of zeros for required discounts and discounts provided. Because I think the purpose of this is really understanding the benefits that are being provided to those income qualified customers. But if there's an argument
Yep.
for making it broader, I'd be interested in hearing that too.
That makes sense to me. And I guess the other dynamic I'll raise, so as a subscription coordinator, we may work with various subscriber organizations. It looks like the form is set up to list all projects associated with a single subscriber organization. So let's say we worked with subscriber organization 1 and subscriber organization 2, we would populate all customers on any project owned by subscriber organization 1 in one of these forms. And then for subscriber organization 2, we'd fill out a separate form with all of those projects.
That's a good question. I think what you suggested seems reasonable to me, right? That you would add a separate tab for one for each subscriber organization. That is one way. That's an easy way to do it with how we've done it, right? We've got, and then you would populate here under organization type. I guess we'd have to think about if this is your name or this is the name of the of the subscription coordinator. No, the subscription manager that you'd be working with.
Well, we are a subscription manager, so
yeah.
The way I don't know if we have any developers on here, but I do think it makes the most sense for this for the whole file to be specific to the subscriber organization itself. I think that's what the statute says. And so, like we don't want to be sharing customer data associated with a different subscriber organization with another subscriber organization. And so I think to the extent we can create a clean break between, one filing from a subscriber organization, I would anticipate that subscriber organization would ask their subscription manager to give them all the data they need to fill this out or fill it out on their behalf. But I do think it makes sense to try to create a break in instances where a manager is working with multiple developers.
Okay. Yeah, because that and that, with how this is set up, if we saw, might also help us if we see on, two separate submissions with the same community solar facility, customers from the same community solar facility on them, for example. I'm just trying to think of what the scenario would be. That would probably, unless there's some clarification of why they're listed in both places, we might be confused about whether how discounts are being provided from the same facility to through different entities. So I'm wondering if it's actually fine what we currently have right now, and
I think that's right. I agree. I see no problem.
Okay.
With what we have.
Okay. I'm gonna take this down now and bring the slides back up for the discussion questions, if that's okay, unless anybody has any other specific questions about, or that would be helpful to keep this up. Okay. Aaron, thank you. Format and substance are okay. Semi-annually, concerns or challenges about that cadence versus more frequently, less frequently? And kind of a secondary question under here is like, is there a particular time of year, if we were to require it, is it just June 1st and December 31st? Are there other reporting structures or milestones that we should think about for how to establish those two reporting periods? Let's take the first one, 2 times per year. Any concerns? No concerns. Okay. Any thoughts on, oh yeah, go ahead. Oh, I thought I saw someone come off mute.
I did. I came off mute. It's Rick Garcia again with the Latino Community Foundation. No big comment on the frequency of the kind of big reporting, but I kind of go back to my comment earlier, is that the actual IQ DIC commitment probably should come and be tracked more frequently, simply because if it's not going well and that community is not being reached and becoming subscribers or utilizers of this community solar program, certain mitigation efforts need to be enacted. Probably sooner than 6 months after that number comes in. So I don't know how that fits into the scheme of reporting, but that is probably something that probably needs to be thought about as a unique factor, particularly with the IQ and DIC communities.
Wait, can you clarify? So is it about how frequently we get the snapshot, or is it about what happens if the snapshot suggests that IQ subscribers are not getting the discounts that they
Well,
should be getting?
I think the latter occurs naturally with the former. If you get the data and it's not producing very well, or at least not on targets, you got to make quick adjustments, or you should be able to make adjustments in order to meet the expectation of the legislation. So I just point that out, that's probably more frequent in that category of customer versus just the general reporting cadence.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and I may rely a bit on my colleagues here, Eric. I don't know if you're still around on like what um, if we were to have an issue, if we were to ask for data, let's say we do it on a semi-annual basis and we found, and there was a concern about the level of discounts being provided, what mechanisms the commission, because there are mechanisms that the commission could have for addressing some of those issues or raising some of those issues, whether it's like a CIM or some commission information meeting to kind of get clarity on what's going on, or some other kind of process. But I don't think the intention here was to restrict the commission's ability to respond to that data, just to outline the process for how frequently we would want that data, to clarify what the expectations are. If that makes sense.
Yeah, Corey, I agree with how you put that. I think this gets back to the challenge that you've raised a couple times, right? Is that the commission's lack of authority over the subscriber organizations kind of puts the commission in a weird position where if problems arise, the only real mechanisms available to the commission would be additional requirements on the utility in one form or another. So it's this sort of indirect approaches to dealing with these problems that we're kind of concerned about. So I think there's kind of I think we're just exploring options here of like what can we accomplish through reporting, and if something appears to be amiss or not working the way that it's supposed to, what then is the recourse, right? The statute here that you have listed on the left is clear about the requirements to subscriber organizations, but that's not self-enforcing, so it's not clear kind of who is responsible for enforcing that if it appears that a subscriber organization isn't adhering to all the conditions in the statute. So that's kind of the delicate balance of considerations that we're trying to get at here.
Yeah, I see the point.
To elaborate a little bit, actually, let me go to Berlin and then I can come back to me.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that if there's consolidated billing, the discount should be set up in like the utility system, right? If they're getting X credit and their target discount is 20%, they're gonna pay the remainder 80% as their charge. So it should be automated. And then I think it would be on like us to make sure that the utility is actually doing that correctly, right? Like that's typically how it is. The utility issues the credits and then we verify to make sure that those are accurate, that the usage or that the production is also aligned with what the developer owner is measuring, like those kinds of things. It's a lot of like fact checking each other. I think where this might be harder to monitor is if there's not consolidated billing. And our recommendation here would be that at least for IQ subscriptions, there should be consolidated billing. It's just so much easier for those customers. The other point I want to make is that if the subscriber organization is not meeting those 20% guarantees, like say they're charging more than what they said, those subscribers will cancel. If they're not getting their guaranteed savings or they don't understand how the program works, they'll opt out.
Thank you, Berlin. Philip?
Yeah, just a comment on the consolidated billing. In the statute, it's explicit that utility with what is it, 500,000 customers or more, they have to do consolidated billing. That would be Excel. And a utility with fewer than 500,000 customers, that would be Black Hills, do not have to do consolidated billing. I think that is put into the bill with like, there's intention behind that. We're 1/15th the size of Excel, and if we are to do consolidated billing, de facto, we would be taking over some of the work of the subscriber organizations. So we would have to, spend additional administrative hours doing work that we aren't currently doing. That would further increase and costs for our customers. And given we're a smaller utility, the percentage admin cost would be higher than, for example, for Excel. I think that was the intention behind making that distinction between the two utilities of the state in the Senate bill. So I understand, Berlin, that it will be easier for your perspective, but I'll have to state that we don't think that it is the intention of the bill, and we think it is that way with good reason, because we would be doing work that isn't ours to do.
So I don't want to send us down a rabbit hole because we still have one more slide. I do want to just clarify that the statute explicitly requires consolidated billing upon request from a subscription coordinator or subscriber organization for utility with more than 500,000 customers. It doesn't explicitly say that a smaller utility should not have consolidated billing. So which isn't to say that we would go that route. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I agree that that's probably the language of the bill. Don't remember it, but I trust you here. But I think there's intention behind writing it that way, and not just saying all utilities have to do it. And
and I take your point on that. So where does this leave us in terms, kind of coming back to these reporting expectations and oversight of the income qualified part of the program? And Rick, kind of coming back to your initial piece, it sounds like we have it sounds like there's no major concerns about what we're requesting from subscriber organizations, subscription coordinators, maybe a little bit more nuance that we need to think about in terms of clarifying in the instructions. We want it reported at the subscriber organization level, and any additional clarification between the folks that they work with or partner with to enroll folks. I heard a comment, I think Berlin, sort of about if the discounts aren't being provided, customers are likely to enforce the problem themselves, if that's the right way of saying it, by canceling. Rick, your comment about sort of the enforcement piece on top of the cadence piece, like how do we address that? I think we've described some of the tensions there, and I just wanted to add some of the tensions there when it comes to the guaranteed discounts. I did also want to add that, when a facility is requesting an allocation, right, they are subject to that 51% of capacity subscribe to income qualified customers. I just want to confirm, does that happen, at does a developer or subscriber organization need to demonstrate that upon applying for capacity, or is that happen after the fact? Like, is there a verification step for that 51% somewhere in here in addition to the guaranteed discount? Those two being the IQ benefits. For the utilities in the room, is that information that you get when someone applies for an allocation, a demonstration that they, I guess, have or will subscribe 51% income qualified subscribers?
Hey, Corey, this is Ryan Austin with Excel. That is something that we are checking and actually are kind of weighing options right now around kind of what's our role in enforcing that, and if so, kind of how do we enforce it? And so, yeah, that's something we're looking at.
Okay.
Just more broadly speaking, I think under inclusive community solar, more responsibility for the program is placed on the subscriber organization or subscription coordinator than the utility, like compared to SolarWords community that we have today. And so we're trying to like take a lighter approach to our role in inclusive community solar. And so, yeah, that's something that we've talked a lot about. Like, is it our job to enforce or make sure that the subscriber organizations are meeting that 51%? And yeah, we've had similar conversations like, well, we have a lot of this information for consolidated billing, for gardens that enroll in consolidated billing. It's less clear if they're not in consolidated billing because we don't have access to what they're charging. But when I will say though, we have built out the enrollment process to allow or require the subscriber organizations to, basically ensure that they're meeting that 51% requirement when they kind of enroll the garden or enroll subscribers in the garden.
Okay, that's helpful. So that is something you are considering, but still working through what that process could look like.
Yeah.
From Philip, I saw you come on camera. I'll come to you next, but I just wanted to ask for folks who are developers or subscriber organizations. I know we talked before about what's sort of known versus not known at the time that you're requesting capacity. Is there something that you demonstrate on that, or that you can demonstrate on that 51% at the time of requesting the allocation, or is that really come later? But other than a commitment to doing it, I mean. Okay, unless someone's muted and talking, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of thoughts there. Philip, did you have another comment?
Yeah, just a comment on the IQ DIC percentage. Honestly, we haven't given like the compliance mechanism between us and the subscriber organization super much thought. Our By virtue of our service territory, all of our community solar gardens, they have like in the high 70s percentages of IQ or DSC subscribers. I think it's 5 census block groups in all of Pueblo that aren't categorized as DIC census block groups. So we just don't think it'll be very hard to meet this threshold. We report on this and include this information annually in our annual renewable energy standard compliance report. So it's also like it's out there, and we'll be concerned if we have to report in a different way that we might find more troublesome or something. But other than that, we haven't thought much about it.
Any final thoughts on this? I know I still have a few questions that we can follow up on at a later date or as part of the rulemaking process. Okay. Let's go to our final topic or part of our topic here and see if this shakes anything else loose. So, as I said, there's prohibited practices, this tension around commission regulation of the subscriber organizations, and then do seem to be a fair amount of concerns that we're hearing from some community members and organizations that represent them around scams or deceptive practices. I'm curious if anyone has a thought on what that they want to share on what you see as the commission's role in ensuring that we comply with or ensuring that subscriber organizations comply with these practices. And this example of as Eric was describing, of like if we need an enforcement mechanism, it may need to be a mechanism on the utility rather on than the subscriber organizations. Curious if anyone has any reactions to that as well. Maybe I'll to get this conversation going a little bit. I'm looking at a few folks who have raised comments, and you don't need to respond, but Jamie Valdez, I know you've weighed in a little bit on this, and Rick Garcia, you've weighed in a little bit on some of the concern or need for oversight and enforcement of some of these requirements. What do you think from your perspective in your communities or the folks that you work with are what do you see as sort of do you see any additional clarification needed on prohibited practices above and beyond what it says on the left side of the slide here? Or are there particular practices you're particularly worried about? Thank you, Nancy. And just to read this out loud, community members aren't trustful of solar companies. They don't know who to believe because there's lots of flyers and programs and no way to verify which ones are legitimate. Berlin, I see the hand. Nancy, is there anything you want to add on that point or any specifics?
No, I just think that it's important to recognize that for the community people, they're not going to pursue any of these opportunities if they don't know that it's an actual legitimate venture. We have had some community members also complain that they bought into various solar programs believing it was going to reduce their energy bills, and so far it has not. So there's a lot of anger and resentment, and just I'm going to check out and not encourage anyone to do any of this because it hasn't worked out for me. I mean, not me personally, but the community members.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing. And just to kind of push a little bit on this, would it be helpful to clarify? I mean, for the community members that you've engaged with, I mean, if we were to clarify what misleading or deceptive conduct is, for example, we've kind of talked about that list of vetted subscriber organizations, so we don't need to revisit that necessarily. But is there something that would help provide that legitimacy that we may have control over as the commission?
I mean, I think Rick is still from Latino Community Foundation of Colorado is still on here. Rick, I don't know if you want to add more
Yeah,
on some of the
yeah,
data that we've collected for the Power Together program.
yeah. Well, I would add one uh, possibility is a vetted subscriber organization list, that's been cleared, filtered, and certified. I don't know if that's the right term, but I think that gives more credibility and substance, and it does prevent others from circumventing a process, for deceptive purposes. That's just one example, but that kind of in that general vein, that would be the kind of expectations I think that could help, diffuse some of this distrust and apprehension among DI communities and NIQ individuals.
Let's go to Berlin next. Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, I was gonna say I agree with what Nancy's saying. We see a lot of challenges when subscriber organizations use like door knockers or like folks who are going out door to door for leads and things like that. The way that um, we don't do any of that soliciting. We approach our existing participants in our other energy assistance programs, and then we're able to auto enroll so we can give them the opportunity to opt out if they choose. And I think them seeing like real bill savings, before they get a note to opt out is really helpful that they can see that there's real savings. I think as an industry, community solar struggles because there is a lot of information out there that solar is a scam. A lot of people dog on community solar in general because sometimes the bill savings can be really low. So I think like we also just have a general marketing problem, but the community is definitely stressed out about these like door-to-door flyers. We've seen folks like pretend that they're Excel. We receive like a lot of tips from folks who are like, hey, this so and so came to my door. They said they were from Excel, but they didn't have a business card or a badge. And like we try to flag those for Excel when we hear it. And so I think like having that list of like trusted organizations, like even if it is a door knocker, and making sure that they're like explicit about who they're from, would be really helpful. But I think there's just like new companies popping up randomly all the time, and the community is nervous about it. And so if there's like a good place to have verified resources, or if it's like community-based organizations that can share legitimate information with their communities, I think that can be really beneficial. And that's where we've tried to like, work with our existing partners, to share the information and verify that it's legitimate. We also try to provide our subscribers details like if someone claims they're us and they're asking you for money, like that's not real. Trying to like suss out, where people might be using us as a scam, right? Because that does happen. Um, yeah, I think this is really hard. If there is a place for people to file formal complaints, I just worry about like subscribers being like, my bill didn't go down. Where it's like sometimes like that's just like not really the subscription in the subscription's control, or like if it is 20%, like 20% for a low bill may not be a lot, right? So what's like their understanding of the program and how it works versus like what's a true complaint, like they wouldn't cancel my subscription after several attempts and things like that.
So it seems like there's two potential ways to address some of the concerns, and that's level of specificity, Berlin, about some of what you've heard from subscribers or potential subscribers about what they've seen is really helpful. Um, on the one hand, and I think this is, we've talked about a list of vetted subscriber organizations and some of the challenges there, but that is like offering a um, like authoritative information about here's the good people, the good entities that you can trust. Although I suppose anybody could still say that they represent one of those organizations and not actually represent. So it doesn't necessarily get to some of the issues that about misrepresentation that you raised. The other piece is sort of the deterrence through enforcement piece that we're sort of hinting at in this first bullet. So um, if we make it a little bit more explicit that the utility, and I hear you on, we may need to clarify or provide some additional language around not just any complaint, but a complaint that's been vetted by the commission or something like that explicitly deals with one of these prohibited practices. Making it clear via rules that the utility could decline to contract with a subscriber organization that has a history of those complaints. I realize that might be taking it, that might be overly burdensome or have a chilling effect on the program, but I raise it because it seems to me those are the two mechanisms that we might have here. So curious if there's any thoughts on, I guess, more of that enforcement approach. Morgan.
Yeah, I'm just curious on this part, or at least just concerned that any type of restriction on the utility's ability to contract with companies that have complaints, how that impacts existing contracts for projects that are getting complaints or something like that for a project that's already been energized, because that can impact our ability to finance any of these projects if there is an ability afterwards to come in and nullify a contract.
A very reasonable point. I think that's another thing. If we were to go this route, and I'm not saying that we are committed to going this route at all, I just want to kind of explore it because it seems like the other natural piece of this. Um, both, it sounds like both on the like nature of the complaint and the like limits of what that means. Are we just talking about new projects versus existing projects? I could see the dangers of or the risks associated with leaving that sort of carte blanche. And so we'll take that back as we consider what to do here. And just to be clear, this is also an example. So if folks have other ideas this is just one idea we have of how we could get at an enforcement mechanism. It doesn't have to be this either, but the angle we have is through the utility, and that's what we were trying to provide some clarity around. Bill?
Yeah, there's a European example. There is over 2,000 renewable energy cooperatives in the EU right now, and those are all community owned. And when every member of the energy co-op has a vote and a say and can raise their hand on every issue, it allows self-enforcement based truly on the input of the owner operators. And so that's just one option, is self-enforcement by owning and operating the system.
Does anyone have any thoughts on that suggestion? To me, just on the face of it, Bill, and I'm not saying that we're going to take it back and consider it. I worry that that is sort of changing the nature of the program that goes significantly beyond what the statute has told us to do at the commission. That would be my concern about, or my initial concern about kind of trying to do some kind of shared ownership piece.
Well, if I could just add one more point, is coordination with other commission initiatives. Colorado is the most progressive in the United States on displacement of utility investment by deployment of local dispatchable dynamic resources. So our new virtual power plant law, our new distribution planning procedures, again, point out the value of strategic deployment of assets on the grid. So, a program like this, trying to get low income revenue, captures the new revenue streams that the commission has already created could really help to drive the program forward. And it's coordination with other statutes and other rules that already exist, like Senate Bill 218 is a major driving legislation on this, capturing the value of the distributed energy resource value stack in order to lower rates to all. So I want to thank Colorado's work on this. It's spectacular.
I can't take the credit for it here at the commission, but I hear the idea, and so I guess one thing I just want to test, because this has come up in a previous meeting. Is there anything in the program, in the statute or the program rules that would prevent a community-owned project?
I think
Because
very
go ahead.
doable, very, very, very doable. And we already have the virtual power plant law, so it'd be very interesting for community solar to become a participant in a virtual power plant to capture all the capacity revenues. The value of the kilowatt hours is really low compared to strategic dispatch of distribution resources.
Philip.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point you're raising. I don't remember the Senate bill, preventing any kind of like co-op or like a company, a member-owned company, from becoming the owners and operators of the inclusive community solar projects. I just want to point out that the utilities are obligated to do a standard offering at a first come first served basis. So with the only except positive discrimination exception being these like the preferred locations. I'm not super sure about that, but that's how I remember it. So I don't think there's anything preventing it, but I don't think the utility has any ability to in particular prioritize this ownership construction over others. I want that to be clear. Unless someone has another perspective on the rules.
That is my understanding as well, that there's nothing preventing a community-owned, inclusive community solar project from requesting an allocation. There's also nothing unless they are a preferred location and the conditions under which the prioritization happens because there's not enough remaining capacity to be allocated occurs, there isn't a prioritization mechanism for those types of projects.
And I just thought of probably unfortunately a practical limitation for this type of community owned project to be able to participate. The applicants for an application to be valid for a utility to consider to award capacity, they have to have all permits, and they have to have site control, and they have to have what's the third thing here? Help me out, Corey. Interconnection agreement, of course.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work for a community-based organization without the resources to pour a lot of money into development cost. I'm not saying it can't be done. I just think it's practically speaking becomes very difficult with those requirements.
Thank you, Philip. Okay, Bill, I think it sounds like there's if additional, if it would be helpful for you to provide additional feedback about kind of the community owned or partially customer owned approach to this and how we might address it in the rules. I think that makes, we welcome that. But I think also we're saying there's nothing in the rules necessarily preventing that. So hopefully that's helpful, but we'll also take back some of your suggestions about other commission programs and stuff and think about if there's anything else there. We are in the last 6 minutes of our meeting here. This has been a really productive discussion. I know I've learned a lot, and I hope sounds like we've identified maybe some areas that require clarity from the commission or require clarity from the community solar ecosystem or the utilities. I wanted to do a few things before we end for the day. One, I want to thank all of you. This is a significant time commitment to join a workshop like this. It can be daunting to engage in a recorded session like this. So thank you for participating today and sharing your input. We hope this has felt productive for you as well. We encourage you to provide any additional written commentary ahead of the formal rulemaking. And we do have our feedback form online, engagedora.org/inclusive community solar, as you see here on the slide. We will keep that. That is for informal comments that you want us to consider as we develop the proposed rule that will go out in the formal rulemaking. We plan to keep that comment tool open until the end of the month. To the end of the month, James. So we'll close it at the end of June. So you have a little bit of time to get any comments in. And then again, once we launch the formal rulemaking, there will be an opportunity for formal comments as well. This is sort of part of preliminary stuff that you want us to consider as we develop the proposed rules. I also wanted to thank our interpreters. And where are they? Thank you. Yeah, Roberto and Lynette, really appreciate the good work that you've been doing in the background here, or for folks who are listening on the Spanish channel. We're really appreciative to have you as part of these meetings and help provide that language diversity. And then finally, I just wanted to remind folks that a recording of this workshop will go up on our website, and you can also reach out to me or Aaron as needed. Our emails are here. As we close for the day, we had a checkout prompt that we just wanted to get a sense for. This is the last planned pre-workshop or pre-rulemaking meeting that we had scheduled. Curious though, if folks think that there would be any additional value in another meeting or workshop ahead of the formal rulemaking, and if so, on which topics. I'm not saying that we are necessarily going to be able to do another one, but and I think we covered a lot of ground. But if there are additional topics, feel free to drop your response in chat before you sign off here. And if you don't have a good response to this, or answer is no, you can feel free to drop off with our thanks for your participation.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Thank
Everybody
you,
have
Corey.
a great evening. All right, for those remaining with us, hope that you have an excellent evening, and I'm gonna end the meeting at the hour. So 1 more minute. All right. Roberto, Lynette, anything for us? I just closed the interpretation channel. Anything before I end?